The Anatomy of Regret. Chapter 1. The Pulse That Should Have Stopped. There are moments when the heart hesitates before obeying. A pulse, suspended between what it knows and what it fears to know. That was how it began for Dr. Adrian Vale, with the silence between two beats in an operating room that still smelled faintly of iodine and burning flesh. The monitors had already been turned off. The nurses had left the room. Only the hum of the overhead lights remained, flickering over the still form of a boy no older than 10. His name was Elias Monroe. His brain, Adrian thought, had been beautiful, a landscape of potential, extinguished by a tumor that refused to yield to the knife. Adrian stood over the body longer than he should have. His gloved hands trembled in the sterile light. He had done everything right. Every incision clean, every vessel cauterized, every motion guided by years of perfect practice. And yet, the boy's heart had simply stopped, as if it had grown tired of fighting a losing war. He tried to tell himself what surgeons always tell themselves. Some lives aren't meant to be saved. But the thought sat in his throat like a lump of iron. When the clock struck midnight, Adrian still hadn't moved. The body lay there, sheet pulled to the chin, a pale crescent of the boy's cheek peeking out. He felt an urge that terrified him to whisper an apology, to admit aloud that he didn't know why he kept losing the ones that mattered most. He removed his gloves slowly, one finger at a time, like undressing from a sin. The sound of the latex snapping off his skin echoed in the sterile air. He left the operating room with his eyes fixed on the floor, where a single drop of blood had dried into the tile, an ordinary thing, almost invisible. But in that moment, it looked like a warning. He wrote the report hours later in his office. His handwriting, once elegant and precise, had become a series of jagged lines. Patient deceased at 011. Cause cardiac arrest during post-op stabilization. Surgeon Adrian Vale. He paused over the name. His own name looked foreign, as if it belonged to someone else entirely. Someone who still believed in mercy. That night, he opened a bottle of wine in his apartment and sat on the floor, back against the refrigerator. His apartment was too quiet. No music, no TV, only the rhythmic dripping of a faucet that refused to be fixed. He watched the dark liquid slosh in his glass, the reflection of the kitchen light bending across it like a wound. He thought of Elias's mother, the way her voice had cracked when she said, "You're his last chance." He had told her that he would do everything possible. He had meant it. He closed his eyes. "You lied," something inside him whispered. "You always lie when you say that." The first voice came 3 nights later. At first it was faint, like the hum of the refrigerator again, a sound his mind easily dismissed. But then it formed words. "You should have stopped at the artery." Adrian froze. The scalpel in his hand, he had been dissecting a preserved brain sample under the microscope, trembled slightly. He looked around the lab. No one was there. The door was locked. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He exhaled, half laughing. "Sleep deprivation," he muttered. "Classic hallucination." But when he looked back through the microscope lens, something was wrong. The cross-section of the brain, normally a static maze of tissue and neurons, seemed to pulse faintly, like it was alive. He blinked. It stopped. He stayed late that night, refusing to go home. The voice didn't return, but the silence felt heavier now, charged with the possibility of something waiting to speak again. By the time the hospital held its morbidity conference the following week, Adrian's insomnia had grown claws. He sat among the rows of surgeons as the department head discussed the case of Elias Monroe. The slide projected on the wall showed a scan of the tumor, a cruel little shadow lodged in the brainstem. "Dr. Vale," said Dr. Morgan, his mentor and former teacher, "you followed standard procedure?" "Yes," Adrian said, voice even. "Pre-op scans showed no vascular anomalies. Resection proceeded within the safe boundary margins. And yet, post-operative imaging revealed an arterial nick. That may have contributed to the hemorrhage." Adrian's jaw tightened. "There was no visible breach during the procedure." Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Sometimes what we refuse to see defines us more than what we can." A murmur of agreement swept the room. Adrian felt his pulse race. Refuse to see. The words pierced deeper than they should have. After the meeting, he found Morgan in the hallway. "You think I made a mistake?" "Admirable excès d'amitié." Morgan sighed. "I think you're human, Adrian, but you've been pretending not to be for too long." That night, Adrian dreamed of the operating room again, but the boy's body sat up from the table this time. The surgical lights flickered, throwing his hollow eyes into sharp relief. "It wasn't the artery," the boy said. "It was your hand." Adrian woke screaming. The weeks that followed blurred. The voice began to appear in new places. The static between radio stations, the whisper of a ventilation fan, the rustle of pages in his notebook. Sometimes it was the boy's voice. Sometimes it was his own. He began writing not reports, but confessions. Each night, he filled page after page with details of every operation he'd performed. The ones that had gone wrong, the ones that had gone right, but still felt wrong. He wrote down things he had never said aloud. The first time he felt excitement at opening someone's skull. The moment he realized he loved the control more than the healing. The faint disappointment he felt when a surgery ended without complication, because it meant the thrill was gone. The pages piled up like evidence. He called the notebook the anatomy of regret. He told himself it was a psychological study, an analysis of guilt as a biological process. But deep down, he knew it was something closer to scripture, a chronicle of his own damnation. Then, one night, the notebook disappeared. He searched his office, his apartment, even the garbage bin. Nothing. He tore apart drawers, sheets, files. The pages had vanished as if they'd never existed. The next day, when he entered the lab, the notebook lay open on his desk. The handwriting was his, but the words on the page were not. "You won't find peace in cutting the flesh. You'll find it in cutting yourself open." He stared at the sentence until the letters began to blur. His chest felt tight, breath shallow. He reached for the notebook, but when he touched the page, a small droplet of blood appeared from nowhere, soaking into the paper like ink. He looked at his hand. A thin cut ran across his fingertip. He hadn't felt it. He began to record the episodes after that, voice notes, camera logs, sleep diaries. Each night he'd wake to the sound of something scratching at his door. When he opened it, the hallway would be empty. But sometimes he'd find small, wet footprints leading away, faintly red against the tile. He tried to tell Morgan once, during a departmental review, "I've been hearing things," Adrian said carefully. "Voices. Maybe post-traumatic stress." "Brazil." Morgan studied him for a long moment. "You know what happens to surgeons who say things like that, don't you?" Adrian nodded. "They get reassigned." Morgan's tone softened. "Take time off. Rest. Before you become another case study." Rest. The word sounded cruelly naive. That evening, Adrian returned to the hospital long after midnight. He slipped into the surgical ward, the security guards long gone. The automatic doors sighed open as if exhaling for him. He walked straight to the morgue. Elias's body had been transferred months ago, but Adrian wasn't there for the boy. He was there for himself. In the autopsy room beneath the cold fluorescence, he laid out his tools. Scalpels, clamps, retractors, instruments that felt like extensions of his own bones. He placed a mirror on the steel table opposite him. He stared at his reflection. Tired eyes, pale skin, a hand that shook just enough to betray him. "You're not doing this," he told himself. "You already did," the reflection replied. He blinked. The mirror didn't then, and he would later swear this was not possible. The reflection lifted its hand independently and drew an invisible line across its chest, from collarbone to sternum. Adrian reached out. The surface of the mirror was warm. He woke in his apartment the next morning, sitting on the floor again, still in his surgical scrubs. His chest ached, and when he unbuttoned his shirt, there was a faint red mark down the center, not deep enough to bleed, but enough to sting. On the coffee table lay the notebook, open to a fresh page. "You've begun the procedure," it read. "Don't stop until you see your heart." He wanted to throw it away, burn it, shred it, but he didn't. Instead, he turned the page and began to write. Subject: Adrian Vale. Operation type: self-dissection of guilt. The words flowed easily, too easily. Outside, the sun was rising pale and cold, the color of bone. And in that light, Adrian felt something unfamiliar stirring beneath his ribs. Not fear, not grief, something closer to inevitability. The pulse that should have stopped was still beating. Chapter 2. The Cartography of Pain. Morning arrived like an interrogation. The sunlight that filtered through Adrian's blinds felt clinical, dissecting him cell by cell. Every detail of his apartment, the half-empty coffee cups, the sterile precision of his bookshelves, the faint scent of ethanol he never seemed to wash away, looked like evidence. He hadn't slept, not really. His dreams had been surgical in their precision, each one peeling back layers of his own mind. He remembered flashes, his own hands submerged in water, heartbeats echoing underwater, the whisper of someone counting backwards from 10, the cadence of anesthesia. When he awoke, there was writing on his arm, not a tattoo, not pen ink either. The letters were faint, as if etched by a fingernail. L-E-F-T. He stared at it in silence. 4 letters. No explanation. No signature. Left what? Left who? Left behind? His brain, trained to map the anatomy of trauma, immediately began constructing patterns. L-E-F-T. Lateral encephalic frontal tract, a section of the brain responsible for self-awareness. He laughed once, dryly. "Cute," he whispered to no one. "Even my hallucinations know neuroanatomy." He went to the hospital anyway. He couldn't stay away. The hallways of St. Ecliptica were familiar, the antiseptic smell, the rhythmic squeak of shoes against linoleum. This was his cathedral, the scalpel, his sacrament. But something had shifted. The faces of the nurses looked unfamiliar, distorted around the edges like reflections in rippled glass. People greeted him, but their voices were filtered, muted, like sound underwater. "Dr. Vale," a nurse said, "are you all right? You look—" He cut her off with a glance sharp enough to draw blood. "Fine. I'm fine." He wasn't. He went straight to the lab. The microscope waited for him like an accomplice. He placed a slide beneath the lens, a sample from a patient's cerebral cortex. and began tracing the structure with his eyes, neuron by neuron, axon by axon. But the longer he stared, the less it looked like tissue and more like writing. Tiny letters forming in the myelin shadows. A message. Map the pain. He jerked back, knocking over the slide. Glass shattered on the floor. The sound too loud, too sharp. He pressed his palms against his ears, but the whisper didn't stop. It had already taken residence somewhere inside him. Map the pain. By evening, he had filled half a notebook with diagrams. He wasn't sure why he was doing it. It wasn't research, not in any conventional sense. It was closer to cartography, but the terrain was emotional rather than physical. Each page bore the outline of a brain, but instead of labeling lobes and ventricles, he labeled memories. The first patient age, 28, failure due to bleeding. The accident, age, 19. The sound of his father's breath before it stopped. The confession, age 31. The kiss that shouldn't have happened. He drew lines connecting them, neural pathways of shame and guilt, veins pulsing with remorse. It was grotesque and beautiful, a map of the unseen. He realized what the voice meant. To understand his regret, he had to dissect it. To dissect it, he had to locate it. He was performing an autopsy on his soul. That night, as he left the hospital, rain began to fall sharp and thin as needles. The parking lot glistened like a surgical table. He paused under the awning, watching the water run down his hands. It looked too much like blood. Then he saw her, a woman standing by the far gate, drenched, her coat clinging to her frame. She wasn't moving, just watching him. When he blinked, she was gone. He should have gone home. He didn't. Instead, he followed the echo of her presence through the rain. The air smelled of iron and disinfectant, the kind of smell that never truly leaves your skin. She appeared again near the side entrance. This time, he saw her face. It was Elias's mother. "Mrs. Monroe," he called, stepping closer. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on him, hollow yet burning. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly. "The morgue," but she interrupted him, her voice hoarse. "Do you remember what you said to me, doctor? That he wouldn't suffer? That he'd be asleep?" He froze. "I lied," he whispered, before he could stop himself. Her expression didn't change. She only tilted her head slightly. "Then you should be asleep too." And just like that, she was gone as if erased from the scene. No sound of footsteps, no trace. Only the sound of rain against steel. He stood there, soaked and trembling. The echo of her words embedded beneath his skin like a splinter. He didn't go home that night. He went back to his office instead and locked the door. The notebook was waiting for him on the desk again. This time it was open to a fresh page. "Every regret has a shape. Find yours." He sat down slowly. His reflection in the window looked older, almost decomposed. He took out his pen and began to draw. At first, the lines were random nerves, tendons, arteries. But as the ink bled deeper into the paper, it began to form something else. A heart, fractured into sections like a diagram. He labeled each one failure, desire, denial, control, and then, below it all, a word appeared in his own handwriting, but he didn't remember writing it. Elias. He closed the notebook. The sound of it shutting was final, like a coffin lid. The next morning, his assistant, Clara, found him still in the office. She was young, brilliant, and too perceptive for her own good. "Dr. Vale?" she said softly. "You've been here all night again. You look—" He cut her off. Bring me the scans from the Monroe case. She hesitated. That case is closed. Not for me. Her eyes flickered with worry. Adrian, you're crossing a line. He smiled faintly. You think there's still a line? She didn't answer. When she left, he opened the scans. The tumor looked like a storm, chaotic, expanding, defying every rule of growth. But there, in the cluster of abnormal cells, he saw something new, something he hadn't noticed before. A shape, not biological, not random. It looked like letters. L-E-F-T. His breath caught. The same letters that had been carved into his arm. He pressed his hand to the page as if trying to feel the pulse of the image. The world tilted slightly. He whispered, "What are you trying to tell me?" The lights flickered. For a moment, just one heartbeat of time, the room was dark. And when the power returned, the scans were gone. The desk was bare except for the notebook. It was open again. You keep looking at others. Start looking inward. Cut deeper. That evening, he sat in front of his bathroom mirror, shirt unbuttoned, a surgical marker in hand. The mirror fogged with his breath. He drew lines across his chest, careful, deliberate mapping, the same quadrants he had labeled in the notebook: failure, desire, denial, control. He traced them as if tracing the fault lines of an earthquake. His hand shook as he reached the center, the heart. He hesitated. Then he heard the boy's voice again, soft, almost kind. "You're so close, doctor." His pulse roared in his ears. He dropped the marker and grabbed the edge of the sink to steady himself. His reflection grinned at him, but his mouth hadn't moved. "Don't you want to know what's inside?" the reflection asked. He backed away, heart pounding. "You're not real." The reflection tilted its head. "Neither are you." The lights exploded glass raining down around him. He fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Beneath his skin, he swore he felt something moving, something shifting just beneath the surface, like a second heartbeat trying to break free. When he looked up again, the mirror was whole, perfect. His reflection calm, surgical, composed. Only his shirt remained stained, a small bloom of crimson over his sternum. He didn't remember walking to bed. He didn't remember closing his eyes. But when he woke, the world was wrong again. He was standing in the operating room, alone. The overhead light burned bright white. On the table lay a body covered with a sheet. He knew, instinctively, who it was. He pulled the sheet back slowly. Himself. His own face stared up at him, pale, serene, eyes closed as if finally resting. But what terrified him most wasn't the sight. It was the smell. It was fresh. He stumbled backward, hand pressed to his mouth. The other him on the table exhaled, just once, and whispered, "Continue the procedure." When he woke again, it was morning. His hands were shaking, but his fingernails were clean, too clean, as though recently scrubbed in antiseptic. He turned toward the nightstand. The notebook lay there, open to a new page. "You've found the map. Now follow it to the end." The letters below were signed in handwriting not his own. M. Elias Monroe. Adrian stared at the initials until his eyes blurred. Then he smiled for the first time in weeks, a strange, cracked smile that didn't belong to him. "Of course," he whispered. "Every surgeon needs a guide." He opened the drawer, took out a scalpel, and placed it gently beside the notebook. The rain began again outside, steady, rhythmic, surgical. And as the city slept, Dr. Adrian Vale began tracing the next incision. Chapter 3. The Weight of the Scalpel. He carried the scalpel like a secret. In the pocket of his coat, wrapped in lint-free gauze, its presence had a gravitational pull, bending his thoughts toward it with every step he took. He became aware of how often his hand drifted toward that pocket, not to touch, but to orbit, a small moon circling its single bright catastrophe. St. Ecliptica Hospital was the kind of institution that worshipped cleanliness the way churches worship God. Floors polished into mirrors, steel that swallowed fingerprints, windows that never revealed weather, only light. Within its ritual sterility, Adrian moved like a penitent, rehearsing a liturgy of cuts and closures that used to keep him safe from meaning. Now meaning hunted him. On rounds, he spoke calmly to families. He listened to residents present cases with clipped precision. He nodded, he corrected, he signed orders. He did everything a surgeon should do. But beneath the choreography, another rhythm pressed, heavy, insistent, a pulse too close to the surface. Clara followed him through the ward, her tablet clutched to her chest. "You're scheduled for a consult at 11 with a glioblastoma candidate. Dr. Morgan wants you to review the approach. Tell Morgan I've revised the anterior corridor," Adrian said without looking at her. "We're not going to flirt with the basal ganglia again. Is that based on the Monroe case?" She kept her voice mild, as if softness could blunt the word. He stopped. The hallway hummed around them. Down the corridor, a janitor pushed a cart that squeaked in time with Adrian's breath. He turned to her. "Everything is based on the Monroe case." They held each other's gaze a second longer than a professional relationship allowed. Clara wasn't just brilliant, she was stubbornly merciful. She had a way of not flinching from the dark, as if she'd been raised in a house where the electricity never worked, and everyone had learned to move by memory through the rooms. "I need you to be honest with me," she said. "Are you sleeping?" "At intervals," he said dryly. "That isn't what I asked." He almost told her about the map, about the letters etched into his skin, about the mirror that remembered him wrong. He almost told her that Elias had learned to write from the arrangement of blood vessels and now communicated through tissue. He said, "After the consult, join me in the lab." "Why?" "Because we're going to chart an impossible pathway," he said. "And I don't think I should be alone when I find it." She nodded without asking what it was. Dr. Morgan met him in a conference room that had been designed to simulate transparency. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a pale oval table like a sterilized altar, monitors in the corners, muted and attentive. Morgan wore grief like a well-tailored coat that never wrinkled. Once, Adrian had thought that elegance aspirational. Now, it looked like armor you forgot how to take off. They stood over an MRI rendered in soft blue planes. The tumor looked like a bruise under ice. 52-year-old, right-handed female, Morgan said. Rapid cognitive decline, aphasia, motor deficits. "We can palliative this. I want your opinion on whether we can be heroic." "Heroism is a euphemism for vanity," Adrian said, "and yet the families ask for it by name." Morgan glanced at him. "What does your vanity say?" Adrian traced the scan with his eyes as if it could be warmed by attention. "If we stay posterior, we can shave necrotic tissue and buy time. If we go frontal, we pretend to cure her and guarantee a deficit she'll spend months trying to forgive." "And your revised corridor?" Adrian drew a line with his finger in the air from nothing to nothing, an incision made from gesture alone, an anterior lateral sweep. "We flirt, but we don't consummate. We let her keep her words." Morgan was quiet. "And what do you keep?" Adrian blinked. "Pardon?" "From the last months. What do you keep?" Morgan's voice acquired the heaviness of a set instrument. You're performing like a surgeon who is writing another book in his head while he operates. Adrian felt the scalpel in his pocket vibrate, a phantom buzz like an unreceived text. I'm revising my understanding of the work. The work? Morgan's mouth bent. You mean the part where we believe we are gods until a real one reminds us otherwise. You once told me I was pretending not to be human, Adrian said. I'm correcting that. Morgan stepped closer, lowering his voice. We don't get corrected, Adrian. We get consequences. That's the only grammar medicine recognizes. The clock on the wall ticked with a smug metronome. Adrian's face reflected faintly in the glass, a ghost caught trying to resemble the living. I'll take the case, he said finally. We'll be conservative. Mercy masquerading as restraint. Morgan began to nod, then stopped. One more thing. I signed off on your leave request. I didn't submit one. You did last night, Morgan said. A week. Effective immediately. Adrian stared. I was in the hospital last night. Morgan didn't blink. Then we're in agreement with your other self. Adrian's throat tightened. I can't take time. You will, Morgan said, because if you don't, time will take you. There was nothing theatrical about the silence that followed. It was the kind of silence in which infections develop. Morgan squeezed his shoulder once, a gesture that tried to cross back over a border that had been sealed years ago. Delegate the consult to Clara, he said, and left. Through the glass, Adrian watched his mentor retreat, smaller with each step, until he was just an arrangement of motions the hallway remembered. When Adrian slipped his hand into his pocket, the scalpel was warm, as if it had been holding its breath. He did not go home. He went to the chapel. Hospitals collected chapels the way the sea collects shipwrecks. As proof of past belief, St. Ecliptica's was small, dim, lined with candles whose flames had the exhausted look of marathoners collapsing at the finish. The air tasted like old apologies. He sat in the fourth pew, center aisle. He did not pray. He measured the altar's distance from the back wall, the crucifix's vertical proportionality, the spacing of votives, the silence between a woman weeping near the side door and her own echo. He catalogued them, nested them, rearranged their weight. Everywhere he went now, he had begun to measure pain as if he were fitting it for a suit. Dr. Vale? The voice trembled, then stabilized. You probably don't remember me. Adrian turned. The woman from the rain, Elias's mother. In the chapel, her features were revealed with a cruelty that daylight spared. She had a face built to endure time's specific kind of violence. Nothing dramatic, only wearing down. She looked like a photograph overexposed by handling. I remember, he said. My name is Mara. She sat at the far end of his pew, a distance that could be crossed by the right sentence. I don't come here to believe. I come to watch the candles go out. It helps to see endings behave. He should have left. He stayed. What do you need from me? He asked. Though it was a selfish question, what he meant was, what proof do you carry? She exhaled. There's a rumor that you kept notes about my son, that you write to your patients after they die. He felt the notebook in his apartment turn a page without him. Rumors are efficient lies. Efficient lies are often true, she said gently. Do you write to them? Yes, he said, because he was too tired to pretend. I write to their absence until it answers. And does it? Sometimes, he said, unkindly. Her mouth moved as if recalibrating the alphabet. Can you write to Elias again and ask him to stop visiting my husband's dreams? The sentence fractured on landing. Please. And that is, Adrian would have cut himself open to understand the exact shape of the request. "I'll try," he said. "You'll try," she repeated, as if tasting an unsigned contract. "What does trying look like for a man like you?" "The same as surgery," he said. "Preparation disguised as faith." She took a slow breath that sounded like fabric tearing. "When boys die, they take the house with them. We still live in it, but the architecture refuses us. I put my ear to the walls at night. I hear water moving. It's his voice. I think it's water moving toward him." Grief did not make people poetic. It made people accurate. "Water moves toward everything," he said uselessly. She stood, smoothing a coat that had never learned how to warm her. "I'll leave you to your unkind answers, doctor." She began to walk away, then turned back. Elias liked maps. He was always making them out of places that didn't exist. If you write to him, draw him a way back. "Mara," he said, the name like a blade with a handle that fit his palm. "I'll try." She left him a candle. He did not light it. There are certain labs, deep inside hospitals, that feel like basements built beneath basements. The air there moves like a patient who has agreed to be intubated. It obeys. Adrian keyed himself in and let the door whisper closed behind him. The lab did not care whether he was on leave. Nothing that loves as a machine does cares about human schedule. He set the scalpel on a tray and unwrapped it. Its smallness insulted him. Men had built cathedrals to house things much less holy than this. On the wall opposite the workstation, he taped a fresh sheet of white paper that covered most of the paint. He drew a circle on it the size of a dinner plate. Then quadrants, then lines. A brain translated into geometry until it no longer belonged to biology. Beneath the circle he wrote, "Pain Meridian." Clara entered without asking permission. She had learned hospitals can be entered by need alone. "You're on leave," she announced, holding 2 coffees like evidence. "I'm where I belong," he said, not turning. "In a room that hums while people sleep." "We don't sleep," he said. "We rehearse unconsciousness." He took the coffee. It scalded his tongue just enough to remind him that one must be fluent in multiple temperatures of truth. She crossed to the paper. "What am I looking at?" "An atlas," he said, "of what I keep pretending is ineffable." "Pain doesn't want to be mapped," she said. "Everything wants to be mapped." He uncapped a marker. "This," he drew a small salt crystal shape in the upper left quadrant, "is failure. It lives here because it speaks first and leaves last." He wrote in a small, meticulous hand, "Failure, primary language." He drew another, "Desire, motor planning." Another, "Denial, sensory integration." Control executive. "It's not anatomical," she said. "It's operable," he said. Clara watched him draw the words Elias like a signature. "Tell me what haunts you," she said. "Say it in plain words or you will begin to sculpt it and I will lose you." He let his body weight settle into the marker as if it were a knife. "It wasn't the artery," he said slowly. "It was my hand. It reached for the complication before it appeared, as if it preferred the elegance of managing catastrophe." Clara did not move. "And the boy?" "He is teaching me how to talk to my own ghosts," Adrian said. "He writes notes in the brain's margins. Yesterday, I found letters in an MRI. Today I found them on my skin." He felt her looking at him not as a colleague, but as one human, bereft of tools, forced to notice another. "You need help," she said. "I have you," he said, almost kindly. "And a blade." She stepped closer to the paper, perhaps to hide the fear in her face by making it smaller. Where do I fit on this map? He drew a dot in the lower right quadrant and labeled it, without irony, witness. You're infuriating, she said, but the word arrived softened. He placed the scalpel on the table between them as if brokering a ceasefire. There's a boundary between curiosity and self-harm, he said. I'm trying to see it before I cross. And if you've already crossed, then we proceed like we always do, he said. We pretend we meant to. Clara folded her arms. What's the plan? Somatic exposure, he said. A rehearsal, not a cut. He glanced at the blade as if it might interrupt a simulation. I want to test whether the body can read a map the mind draws. He rolled up his sleeve. Across the inner forearm, faint, the letters still ghosted, L-E-F-T. Clara's breath caught. Who did that? Topography, he said. It's how the house writes to the engineer. Adrian, take a marker, he said. I'll tell you where to draw. She hesitated, then picked up a sterile pen. Where? He guided her hand to his forearm as a mentor might guide a resident's first suture. Here, he said softly. Label the ulna, control, the radius, denial, the crease of the wrist, desire, the pulse, failure. Her pen moved slowly, letters flawed with the tremor of caring. When she finished, he looked like a diagram found in a book no one checked out because it contained a language no one wanted to speak. Now, he said, press on each label with your thumb. She did. At control, he felt a hollow ache, like a sound swallowed. At denial, nothing, which felt honest. At desire, his hand tried to close around hers without permission. At failure, his heart tripped, then resumed, embarrassed. You're not a lab animal, Clara whispered. He nodded. I'm the lab. The room's hum deepened, as if the building had exhaled into the ductwork. He became aware of the exact pressure of air on his skin, of how we mistake steadiness for absence. Again, he said. She repeated the presses. This time, Adrian spoke as each one landed. Control, he said. I operated the story so thoroughly it stopped breathing. Denial, he said. I lied to his mother in a voice that sounded like medicine. Desire, he said. I wanted to be the last person anyone ever needed. And brands. Failure, he said, and his throat closed. He forced it open. I am a man who prefers edges because middles feel like drowning. Clara stepped back. Enough. He opened his eyes. He hadn't realized he'd closed them. The map on the wall waited, expectant. When I was 19, he said abruptly. My father waited too long to die. Clara did not move. Tell me carefully. He had a stroke alone in the kitchen while I was upstairs studying cranial nerves for a test I would ace. I found him 20 minutes later, the right side of his body already forgetting him. And I calculated how long had language been departing, how much was salvageable. I phoned the ambulance. I timed my own tears to deliver information without obstruction. I was praised. I learned the skill of being unaffected. And he never returned to himself, Adrian said. When the therapist asked him to name objects, he called a spoon doctor. He would point at the kettle and say, son. I corrected him. I believed I was helping. He looked at me like a man watching a bridge he built collapse because the engineer preferred the aesthetics of failure to the physics of safety. Clara's eyes shone with a sheen he pretended belonged to the fluorescent lights. Your father did not die in the kitchen, she said. No, Adrian said. He died in the interval between his need and my efficiency. Silence swelled, slow as blood pooling beneath a dressing. "Adrian?" Clara's voice was smaller. "Where does forgiveness go on your map?" He considered the white spaces. "Forgiveness is blank paper," he said. "Territory surrendered to an enemy you cannot define." She set the pen down like a weapon she was ashamed to carry. "You should go home," she said. "You should sleep where the furniture remembers you." "I don't want to be remembered," he said. "I want to be correctly forgotten." She shook her head in a way that suggested prayer. "I can walk with you, but I can't go inside your house." "You already have," he said. He didn't mean the sentence to be cruel. It wore cruelty the way certain truths do when they're told too late. She left him then, not by storming, not by sighing, but by obeying the small protocol humans observe when leaving rooms where they have heard more than they wanted. Night took the hospital with its usual professionalism. In the lab, the map on the wall absorbed darkness and returned none. Adrian sat on a stool, elbows on his knees, head bowed as if kneeling before an invisible surgical light. He unwrapped the scalpel a final time. The metal greeted air with a brightness that felt like attention. He held it between thumb and forefinger, index curled, the posture of a man who has learned to separate human from problem. On the table, the notebook lay open to a blank page. He did not reach for a pen. He listened. The hum gathered, condensed, and then broke into a voice that was not a sound, but a calibration, a pressure against the bones of his ear. "We proceed," it said. "Elias," Adrian whispered. "Not Elias," the not sound replied, "is greater than you." He angled the blade toward his chest and stopped a hair's breadth from skin. He let the edge cool there, an eclipse unconsummated. The body, recognizing its old ritual, offered him adrenaline. He refused. By staying, "I am not going to cut," he said aloud. "To the room, to the map, to the boy, to the man on the table in the dream, I am going to name. And if the naming is accurate enough, perhaps the body won't insist on proof." The silence shifted, uncertain as if the chorus had been handed new sheet music. He pressed the flat of the blade, not the edge, to his sternum. The metal recorded heat. He said, "Failure is the part of me that prefers a solvable ruin to an intact uncertainty." He moved the flat 2 inches left. "Desire is not sex and not love. It is the fantasy of being necessary in precisely the shape another person's life will never accommodate, down to the soft xylophone of ribs. Denial is fluency, the way language arranges itself to make suffering sound like a syllabus." He angled the handle toward his shoulder. "Control is abandoning what lives to preserve what performs." He waited. Air returned. The room allowed. Somewhere deep in the building, a compressor shuddered and continued. He lowered the scalpel. "Coward," said a child's voice, with a gentleness that annihilated pretension. "I have been brave in the wrong directions," he said. "Allow me a single correct cowardice." On the bench, the notebook turned a page without wind. Words appeared, leaving no ink, only absence rearranged into letters. "Draw him away back. Mara. Elias." The house that held water in the walls. He stood, pulled the paper from the wall, and taped a new sheet beside it. He drew a small square at the bottom edge. A door. He drew stairs that climbed, turned, climbed. He drew a corridor that narrowed until it became a thread. He drew, at the end of the thread, a circle the size of a boy's perfect fist. He wrote, "Return." He wrote, "No anesthesia." He wrote, "If pain is proof, let proof be kind." He capped the marker and searched the room for an impossible address. Finding none, he spoke the map aloud, as if the voice could parse a verbal coordinate system. "Elias," he said, "the left corridor is open. You are missed. You are permitted to forget us. You are permitted to go where your mother cannot follow you, and to be forgiven for that mercy." Something in the air uncoiled. It did not resemble relief. It resembled a knot, deciding to stop being a knot without consenting to become thread. He turned off the lights and unexpectedly found the room brighter. The paper gathered what little glow the emergency strip provided and redistributed it as hope. In the hall, the motion detectors woke a string of lights in sequence. He followed them like a pilgrim following breadcrumbs, accepting the architecture's small kindnesses. At the stairwell, he paused. A boy stood one flight below, back turned, counting the steps backward. 10, 9, 8. The voice was precise and patient, like anesthesiologists coaxing the brain toward forgetfulness. "Elias?" Adrian asked. The boy did not turn. 7, he said. "Wait," Adrian whispered, and then hated himself for asking a child to do anything other than leave. 6, said the boy. 5. His hand traced the rail, small as a prescription bottle. 4. Adrian did not move. He let the numbers strip him of pretense the way antiseptic strips a field of skin of its scent. 3, the boy said. "Tell your mother the water is not moving toward you anymore," Adrian said. His voice didn't carry. It arrived. 2. "And tell my father," Adrian said, "that I know the spoon was a doctor and the kettle was a son. I was wrong to correct the language of survival." 1, the boy said softly. He reached the landing and dissolved. Not vanished, dissolved, like sugar given its permission. The stairwell remembered being empty. Adrian stayed until the lights decided he no longer existed and shut themselves off. Toward morning, a thin rain began that wasn't weather so much as an apology the sky had rehearsed into habit. He walked home without his coat, letting cold annotate him. In his apartment, the furniture did not greet him. It merely took his weight and refused to complain. He placed the scalpel on the counter. He slid the drawer closed on it with the same respect you grant a sleeping animal with perfect teeth. On the table, the notebook lay open. He did not sit. He wrote standing, because some confessions prefer altitude. "Dear Mara, I drew a door and did not lock it. I spoke to your boy with the grammar he taught me, the counting that undoes breath, the corridor that narrows until it forgives. I cannot promise visitation schedules for ghosts. I can only testify to absence behaving differently tonight. If water still moves in your walls, it is not toward him. It is water learning a new house. I will write again if silence answers me with a shape I can carry to you." He signed it A. He stared at the initial, a letter that looks like a ladder if you don't close it properly. He left it open. He slept then. Not long, not cleanly, but without drowning. When he woke, noon had already impersonated morning. His phone vibrated with messages he did not open. He poured coffee like a ritual of admission and called Mara before the caffeine could interfere. She answered on the first ring, as if her hand had been waiting on the phone like a vigil. "Hello?" "Mara," he said. "It's Dr. Vale." A pause that assessed the distance between doctor and man. "Yes." "He has," I wrote, he said, and realized how absurd the sentence sounded spoken aloud. I spoke to him. "You asked him to stop visiting?" "Not pleading, accounting. I asked him to decide," Adrian said, "and told him he wouldn't betray you by choosing to go." The line carried her breath, measured and foreign. "Last night," she said, "the house didn't wake us. In the morning, the walls were dry." She paused, and when she continued, her voice changed key the way metal does under stress. "This doesn't mean anything," she said quickly, like an oath to rationality. "This is just one night." "Yes," he said, "just one." He listened for a drip. He heard none. "You sound." She searched for something neither had been allowed to own. "Different." "So do you," he said. She hung up before gratitude had a chance to humiliate them both. Adrian stood in his kitchen and let the silence reconfigure him, not to a better man, not to a worse one, to a man who had agreed to be measured by something other than outcomes. On the counter, the drawer remained closed. He touched it lightly as one touches the forehead of a feverish child, to ensure presence, not to change anything. On his forearm, the letters had faded, leaving faint scores a stranger might mistake for scratches from a beloved animal. He traced each: control, denial, desire, failure. The words no longer clamored to be incised. They asked to be pronounced. He spoke them once, softly, and felt nothing tear. From the other room, his phone chimed. A message from Clara. "Morgan is furious you ignored your leave. Also, he moved your consult to Dr. Patel. Also, please tell me you slept." A second message followed before he could answer. "If you're going to keep drawing maps on the wall, at least let me draw the legend." He smiled, a small, asymmetrical thing the mirror might misinterpret as pain. He typed, "Bring tape, bring coffee. Bring a refusal to let me become what I know how to be." He hit send. The pulse that should have stopped continued. Not steadier, not cleaner, but honest in a way that admitted fatigue. Outside, the rain loosened into something almost musical. The city, which had never once noticed his genius, shrugged and went on. He let it. In the quiet, he heard the faintest scrap of a voice, not a boy's, not a mentor's, not a mother's. His own, arriving from very far away, unspectacular, newly permitted. "Continue the procedure," it said. Not a command, a description. And for once, he understood it meant live. Chapter 4. The house that memorizes hands. The smell of the lab lingered on Adrian's clothes even after a shower. Ethanol, binding glue, a hint of latex that no soap could convincingly negate. He dressed anyway, not into the anonymity of scrubs, but into a shirt he had not worn in months, the collar stiff, the fabric articulating his shoulders as if to remind him there had been versions of him that knew how to eat dinner at tables rather than at workbenches. On his forearm, the ghosted words had faded to pale threads. He traced them and found the sensation equivalent to reading an inscription long after the monument had been defaced, meaning intact, edges kinder. Clara arrived precisely when she said she would, which meant she had stood outside his building long enough to practice knocking without sounding like emergency. She carried coffee, a roll of blue painter's tape, and a paper bag whose grease shadow confessed nothing but warmth. "You ate?" she asked by way of greeting. "I remembered how," he said. "Good." She held up the tape. "You asked for refusal. I brought the adhesive version." He stepped aside. The apartment had never liked guests. It tolerated her the way certain wounds do a hand that knows where to touch without asking permission first. Clara set her things on the kitchen island, then walked to the largest blank wall and measured it with nothing but her eyes. "You're going to let me draw the legend," she said. "I invited you to," he said. "And you don't invite easily." She tore a strip of tape and affixed a corner of blank paper to the wall. Another strip, another. Soon a white rectangle hung there like a window to a climate without weather. "Okay," she said. stepping back. Show me where we've already been. He drew the circle again, not out of compulsion, but out of fidelity to a grammar he in the silence had begun to share. Quadrants, labels, the small square he'd drawn in the hospital, a door, bottom edge, the stairs and thread, and boy's fist circle. Return, no anesthesia. He wrote them without shaking, which qualified as a private miracle. Clara watched, then, without waiting for permission, took the marker from his hand. She sketched a second door, this one on the right-hand edge of the circle, opposite return. Above it she wrote, stay, beneath it, with terms. She drew a small icon next to the word, not a heart, not a brain, a hand. You're adding architecture, he said. I'm adding a contract. She glanced at him, catching something unguarded in his face. If a boy chooses to stay where the house can still smell him, he should get to set the terms. Adults talk about closure like it's a door you shut once. Children understand it's a hinge you oil for the rest of your life. Why a hand? He asked. Because houses remember hands, she said. Doorknobs don't collect faces. They collect oils. We leave our grip behind, and wood learns our names. She capped the marker. I grew up somewhere that didn't pretend to forget us just because we moved out. He studied the icon. And the terms? That we get to keep one room, she said. But it can't be the kitchen or the bedroom. It has to be a hallway, somewhere transitional, somewhere the house can feel us passing, not camping. And for ambulatory grief, he said, surprised by the relief the phrase delivered. She smiled without softness. You make everything sound like an operating note. It's how I know where to put my hands, he said. They stood there for a moment, two people rehearsing friendship as if it were a delicate surgical approach. The apartment absorbed them without commentary. His phone vibrated. A message from Morgan. We will speak at 1600. If you are not in my office then, I will come find you where you are. Another, from an unknown number. Scant characters that arranged apology with incorrect grammar. Mr. Vale, this is Mara. I don't know if this is allowed. Today the house is quiet. I keep waiting for the noise to mean something. I'm afraid of what it doesn't mean, too. He texted back. Quiet can be a sentence without punctuation. You get to choose if it's a beginning or an end. If it changes, tell me. If it doesn't, also tell me. He slid the phone aside, as if refusing to let the device rearrange the room's pressure. He looked at Clara. You were right about the legend, he said. The map without it was performance. With it, it's instruction. Instruction to who? She asked. Whoever remembers how to read hands, he said. She put the marker down. Before 4 o'clock, when you let Morgan rearrange your cartilage, you're going to show me the thing you don't say in elegant sentences. He considered refusing. Then he turned his left wrist upward and exposed the thin white seam of an old scar, one he'd forgotten to include in his catalog. I thought you never cut, she said quietly. I was 16, he said. I didn't cut to die, I cut to see. He traced the line. It was shallow, because I loved anatomy more than I loved demonstration. I thought if I could see even a thin horizon of what lived underneath, I would stop inventing it. It didn't work, but the scar flattened something inside me that had been failing to lie down. Ismade he? She didn't touch the wrist. She looked at it the way you look at a window in a house you don't own, with respect for the view and for the permission you haven't been given. Thank you, she said. And the words did not behave like gratitude. They behaved like calibration. He nodded. Now your turn. She drew a small house under stay. A child's house, archetypal. A triangle on a square window, a door with a knob. But at the center of the triangle, she placed a dot. What's that? He asked. Chimney heart, she said. Smoke that goes out and keeps the neighbors aware. If it stops, people come knocking. I don't have neighbors, he said. You do now, she said, recapping the marker with unnecessary precision. You have me, and Morgan, whether you like it, and Mara, whether you know how to deserve it. She gestured to the wall. And whoever this will become when the paper is full. Be careful, he said. Maps sometimes believe the explorers belong to them. She smiled. A quick, electric thing that warmed the room. Then we'll file a counterclaim. He arrived at Morgan's office on time, not because he feared the man's anger, but because punctuality felt briefly like a way to prove to reality he remembered how to keep a bargain. The office smelled of fine dust, the kind that settles on books no one will ever throw away. Morgan didn't stand. He implicated a chair with his hand. Adrian Saturday. I could fire you, Morgan said conversationally. It would feel responsible. I thought we were beyond feeling, Adrian said, then regretted the quip. It made him sound like a man who'd mistaken wit for spine. You are my best surgeon, Morgan said, and you are starting to rot from the inside. I smell it on you, the way one smells fruit that decided ripeness was an insult. Adrian waited for anger to crest and find a shore. It did not come. Morgan's voice stayed level, more dangerous for its refusal to shout. You think this is about the boy, Morgan said. It is, and it isn't. I have watched you build a cathedral out of that case because cathedrals take longer to burn. I am trying to practice an honesty that isn't theatrics, Adrian said. Then answer this, Morgan said. If you could undo your first successful surgery, the one that made you famous, the one that taught you the hospital, would rearrange its resources to suit your preferences. If you could go back and make that operation a failure, would you? Adrian did not expect that question. It entered him like cold water. He tried to answer fast and realized speed would betray him. He slowed. No, he said. I would keep it, but I would also keep the version of me that shook in the locker room afterward, staring at his hands as if they were independent citizens. I fired him. And hired who? Morgan asked. A foreman, Adrian said. He built with efficiency. He got me promoted. He supervised my disappearance. Morgan leaned back. The chair accepted him as a long-term tenant. Do you want your job? I want to want it, Adrian said. And I want to do it while remembering whose body it is and whose story it isn't. Morgan's face altered by an increment only a colleague of many years would register. Not a smile, a release of some muscle assigned to skepticism. You will take the weak, he said. You will see no patients. You will cut nothing that bleeds. If I sense you have violated this, I will make a phone call you cannot out-argue. Understood, Adrian said. And you will see Dr. Henley, Morgan added. She is a psychiatrist who understands the religious fervor of men like you. Mandatory? Let's pretend you volunteered, Morgan said. It will be an aesthetic improvement. Adrian nodded. Send me the time. Already did, Morgan said, gesturing to the phone he always assumed Adrian refused to silence. One more thing. Mara Monroe called me this morning. She said she does not hate you today. She said I should tell you that because she fears you will need the data in casting self-dars. Adrian's throat tightened. I don't know how to receive that. Receive it the way you receive a suture, Morgan said. Don't admire its elegance. Don't argue its placement. Accept that it will itch as it heals. He stood. The meeting ended without ceremony. On his way out, Adrian paused at the door. Thank you, he said. Morgan looked at him the way a lighthouse looks at ships, by repeating an ancient gesture that never gets to be tired. I did not do this for you, he said. I did this for the people who haven't met you yet. Dr. Henley's office lived in a building across the street from St. Ecliptica. It made a living pretending it was not a hospital by wearing brick instead of glass and letting plants try to colonize the windows. The waiting room contained chairs with arms wide enough to confess to, magazines that believed time forgot them, a bowl of peppermint candies that tried to hand adult mouths their childhood back. He did not take one. Henley opened the door herself. She was shorter than he'd expected, older, with hair that had rejected dye and found dignity without it. Her eyes did not do the needless trick of being kind. They did the necessary trick of being accurate. Dr. Vale, she said, you're early. I know. I came to see how the room behaves before I confess to it, he said, then winced. Forgive me. I make language do push-ups when I'm nervous. That's permissible, she said, as long as you don't ask it to lift what it can't carry. He followed her into the office. No couch. 2 chairs angled toward the same neutral middle distance. A clock that ticked like a creature that trusted itself. A framed print of a diagram of the hand. You like hands, he said, before choosing a chair. Hands are the first promise we learn how to keep, she said. Sit wherever you want to keep this one. Saturday, she did not open a notebook. She looked at him like a competent nurse looks at a vein, not in search of character, just an entry. I won't insult you by asking why you're here, she said. I'll ask instead what symptom you're using to disguise the cause. He exhaled. Insomnia with hallucinations, guilt that has memorized the path in my house and in my head. An impulse toward self-dissection I'm attempting to translate into naming. Translation, she said. Good word. Who taught you the target language? A boy I failed, he said. And a woman I haven't succeeded with either. And what do they ask of you? To draw maps, he said, and to let them be read. By whom? Whoever's left, he said, which, to my surprise, includes me. She nodded once, as if he had correctly identified the artery she would not let him sever. Tell me about the impulsive cutting, she said. Frequency, intensity, intent. He told her about the mirror, the warm glass, the line the reflection drew, as if the other him had already begun without consent. He told her about the old wrist and the new refusal. He told her about pressing the flat of a blade and calling the parts of himself by names he had earned and names he had stolen. And the voice? She asked when he finished. It says, we proceed, he said. And sometimes it says, coward, with a tenderness I recognize. She sat back. You want me to say psychosis, she said. You want me to say the thing that lets surgeons call in sick without having to explain poetry. What do you say? He asked. I say you are overhearing a part of you laid off when you became profitable, she said. He's angry. He also wants his job back. He will not stop picking locks until you let him at least help with the keys. He swallowed. Is he safe? He's an apprentice, she said. You're the attending. He'll be as safe as you are honest, and as dangerous as your pride will allow. And the cutting? You will remove blades from mirrors and pockets, she said. You will not punish your body for hosting your mind. If you must see, You will see with supervision." She gestured at herself. "That's me?" He nodded. "I can't obey that." "You can practice it," she corrected. "Obedience is for the OR. Here we grade you on different virtues." He closed his eyes for a second. "What if practice isn't enough?" "Then we'll change the metric," she said. "We're allowed. This isn't a trial." He opened his eyes. "You sound like someone who's watched a lot of men try to atone with technique." "I sound like someone who has loved a few," she said, not offering him their names. "Tell me about your father." He told her about the kitchen, the spoons, the kettle misnamed on purpose by a brain that had found shelter in metaphor because labels had betrayed it, about the look on the older man's face when his son corrected survival out of him. He did not cry. He did not perform, not crying. He reported. "And now," she said softly, "you've chosen a profession where your precision is devotion and your control is mercy, except when it isn't." He nodded. "Homework," she said, as if assigning him the simplest suture. "Go home and let your house memorize your hands again. Touch the backs of chairs as you pass them. Touch the door jamb you always bump with your shoulder. Write me every place your palms rest without thinking. Then write me one place you haven't touched since you moved in." He frowned. "Why?" "Because your body lives where your vows do," she said. "You've made vows to suffering. I'd like you to renew some to furniture." He almost laughed. It arrived as breath instead. "When do I see you again?" "2 days," she said. "Come early if you want the room to behave first." He stood. He did not offer his hand. She did not make him perform that courtesy. He left with a list in his pocket and the unexpected sensation that someone had braided his thoughts into something that could tie, not strangle. At home, he did what she told him. It felt both human and faintly ridiculous. He touched chair backs, the cold square of the metal freezer handle, the chipped paint on the bathroom door frame, his shoulder knew by bruise alone, the smoothed edge of the counter where he set instruments down as if it could call time of death. He wrote them. The list looked like a nurse's chart rendered by a poet with a head injury. He walked from room to room and realized he had not touched the books in the lowest shelf since moving in, the shelf that required kneeling. He knelt, the spines greeted the heel of his hand with the dust of the lives he had not read yet. He wrote that too, and felt a small correction apply at the base of his skull, as if a screw had found its thread. He was still on the floor when the knock came, not urgent, not uncertain. He rose and opened the door. Mara stood there with rain in her hair that could have been new or leftover. She held a manila envelope like a verdict. "I didn't call first," she said. "I didn't want you to have time to prepare your kindness. I don't have a script for you," he said, moving aside. "Only chairs." "I'll stand," she said. She did. "I found something," she said, lifting the envelope. "In Elias's room, in the bin under his bed, where he kept things he wasn't finished with. Maps. He took the envelope with hands that remembered how to hold a newborn brain. Inside, pages, small, folded, soft as fabric, from being handled by a child who believed paper deserved season after season of attention. He unfolded the first, a neighborhood that did not exist. Streets labeled with words like anyway and nearly and stay for now. A river named I'll think about it. A legend. Red equals places where I don't have to be brave. Blue equals places where grown-ups speak slowly. Green equals places where the dog knows me. He felt his knees forget their job. Saturday, he didn't show us these, Mara said. He made other maps for us, the ones that kept us from knowing which rooms scared him, I thought. She swallowed the thought before it could accuse. Do you see what I think I see? He looked up at her and discovered that his face could do something useful with grief. He wanted corridors more than doors, Adrian said. She exhaled a noise that resembled both wind and permission. Yes, she said. Yes. He spread the pages on the table, neighborhood after neighborhood mapped out of verbs instead of nouns. Detours labeled, if he says it like that again, take this alley. Bridges called, don't make me tell you twice. A cul-de-sac named, stay here until you hear me laugh. Clara's little house on his wall. The dot in the roof, chimney heart. You can keep these, Mara said, surprising him, or copy them, or burn them. I don't know what the right ritual is for letting a boy's instructions continue without him. I only know he wrote them, and you draw his language. We will copy them, he said. We will learn their grammar. We will add our legend to his. You and the woman? She asked. No jealousy, only inventory. Me and anyone willing to not be efficient, he said. She nodded. Her eyes moved past him to the white paper on the wall and stopped at the hand icon Clara had drawn. Good, she said simply. Make sure you teach that to the hospital too. She turned to leave, then, at the threshold, held up her own palm. For the house, she said. He raised his and met it with his, not touching but letting the air translate. She left. He closed the door on the smallest click the lock could make. He carried Elias's maps to the wall and taped them around the circle. The room changed temperature by a degree no thermostat could report. The apartment began to memorize him again. He pressed his palm to the paper hand. In the silence that followed, the voice returned. Neither child nor God, neither brave nor kind. We proceed, it said. I know, he answered, with terms. He went to the drawer. He slid it open. The scalpel lay inside, a sleeping animal with perfect teeth, as before. He took it out, not to cut, but to weigh. He turned it in his hand until it caught the light and reflected it onto the wall in a thin line that divided stay from return. He drew the line on the paper with a pencil instead, dull enough to respect the surface. He labeled the line hinge, and for once he did not ask the room to applaud his restraint. He asked it to hold. Night gathered itself outside like a nurse restocking. Inside, paper, tape, hands, the honest fatigue of a man who had replaced ritual with practice and found the results indistinguishable to anyone but himself. He slept on the couch, as if sleeping in a transitional space could teach his body how to stay and how to go at once. In the dim, the maps rustled once as the building settled, or as the boy, satisfied with the legend, turned toward whatever house beyond houses remembers his hands. Chapter 5. The Terms of Staying. The morning found him in the position he'd chosen, not the one the night had negotiated. On the couch, sideways, one arm draped over his head like a man making a shelter of himself. When he opened his eyes, the wall was waiting, patient as a nurse with a chart and an expression that promised nothing but attention. The circle, return, stay, the penciled hinge like a seam a tailor trusted. He sat up slowly. The apartment remembered him, a centimeter at a time. The air remembered his breath. The couch remembered his weight. The drawings remembered his hand. On the table, the manila envelope sat open like a mouth that had finished speaking and would not be coaxed into repeating itself. Adrian reached in and removed another of Elias's maps. This one was a city he could almost recognize, the city where Saint Ecliptica impersonated mercy with glass and money. In the center, a park drawn too large, the kind of error children make when their feet learn to measure what adults insist is small. Along one edge of the park, a path labeled "Shh." On the opposite edge, "Louder, please." He taped the map beside "Stay" and stared at the two words "Shh" and "Louder, please," until he realized they were the only instructions he had ever given his own life with any consistency. A message arrived. "Clara, I'm bringing grid paper and a level. Don't argue." Another, nested beneath it, a photograph, her hand holding a carpenter's level, the bubble, a small eye trying to center itself. He typed back, "Bring the stubborn bubble too. Coffee is on." Then, before he could curate his sincerity into a shape that made him forgivable, he added, "Thank you for drawing a hallway." The reply arrived quicker than his doubt. "You're welcome. Save me a wall." He showered beneath water that had finally accepted the temperature he asked for. He dressed without theater. On the way to the kitchen, he ran his hand down the door jamb Henley had assigned him to memorize. He wrote its texture into his head, where 1,000 incision plans had lived rent-free. By the time Clara knocked 3 soft staccato taps, he would have identified Blind. The apartment had decided she belonged to the genre of objects it would not punish. She entered holding a tall tube of rolled grid paper and a plastic case of pencils, their yellow a cheerful insult to grief's palate. "Where do you want the axis?" she asked, putting the level against the top edge of the largest sheet. "If we're going to pretend to science, we should at least mirror the theater." He gestured to the hinge, the pencil line between stay and return. "Make this our y-axis," he said. 0 at the hinge, positive toward staying, negative toward returning. "Physicians," she muttered, positioning the level until the bubble consented, "you'll give anything a coordinate if it stands still long enough." "It helps me not cut," he said. "Then we graph," she said. She drew faint tick marks along the line. "Intervals?" "Days," he said. "It's the only unit of time we can afford to afford." "And what are we plotting?" "Proof," he said, then shook his head. "No, kindness." "As a function of what?" He watched her, and realized nothing in the room could be made honest if he wasn't. "As a function of restraint," he said. "How much less I take just because I can." She lifted the pencil, then lowered it again. "That's not nothing," she said. "What's your initial condition?" "Yesterday," he said. "Hinge equals 1. I did not cut. I named instead." She penciled a point. Light. As if noise might erase it if it wasn't careful. "We'll see if the bubble approves." Ondario. The apartment approved their math the way furniture approves a rearrangement that troubles its habits but respects its joints. They worked in comfortable silence. When they spoke, it was to name tools and tape, to request third hands, to argue lightly about borders. They built a legend: blue Elias, green Mara, yellow Henley, gray Morgan, red Self. The markers lay in an orderly row that pleased them both. When they were done, the wall had given up its blankness and found occupation. The circle no longer looked alone. The maps made it a plaza. The axis cut the plaza neatly, the hinge at its center. Even the small house with the chimney heart had acquired neighbors. "Now say the thing you don't want the wall to hear," Clara said, capping the last marker. "Then we'll feed it something it can keep." He sat on the edge of the counter, palms flat, as if testing his grip on the room. "I went to see Henley," he said. "She assigned me to touch this place. It felt silly, until it didn't. Clara nodded, as if she'd heard a lab value normalize. And the blades? In the drawer, he said, and let his gaze show her the exact one. She said I can't punish my body for hosting my mind. You can quote that at me when I pretend to forget. I already did, she said, and he smiled without ceremony. His phone vibrated again, a voicemail notification from a number he recognized and disliked. The hospital's central paging system. On leave or not, the building still knew how to ring him with a bell that rearranged his blood. He pressed play. Code blue neurosurgical ward, bed 17. Dr. Vale being paged as secondary, on file. Repeat, code blue bed 17. He froze. The message still playing in a way that made no sense because it had already happened by the time he heard it. The timestamp. 3 minutes ago. Clara watched his face change and then discipline itself. You're on leave, she said before he could invent a rationale. Patel's on the floor. It's my ward, he said. The sentence behaved like an apology and a claim at once. She didn't move to block him. She knew better than to make bodies obey rooms. Terms, she said softly, tapping the word under stay. With terms. He stood, already moving, the apartment loosening its grip as if it had learned how to let him go without calling it abandonment. You coming? He asked, because he was trying to be the man who invited, not the one who instructed. Of course, she said, grabbing her coat and the resolute tube of grid paper like a talisman. They did not run. Running is for people who need the hallway to understand their urgency. Surgeons walk like weather systems, inevitable, pressured, indifferent to plant life. They arrived at St. Ecliptica with breath to spare. The neurosurgical ward hummed with the pitch of practiced emergency. A cluster of staff outside bed 17's room shifted the way schools of fish do when the water makes a rule. A crash cart like a bright red confession. Patel stood at the bed's foot, speaking in a steady voice that braided instruction with calm. Charge to 200. Clear. Shock. The body on the bed jumped like a taut catapult string being released. The monitor's flat line learned a comma, then decided against it. Patel, resume compressions. 1 milligram epinephrine. His eyes flicked up, found Adrian, didn't flinch. Dr. Vale is on leave, he said to the room, loud enough for the record to hear. Then, quieter, to Adrian. Watch. Speak if I'm about to kill him, otherwise be furniture. Adrian could have loved him for that sentence. He did what he was told. He became a table that talked. He stood against the wall and watched and surrendered to the unbearable competence of other people. He noted airway, rhythm, meds. He counted silently with compressions. He wanted to place his hands over the resident's hands and adjust the depth by a fraction. He wanted to feel the sternums give. He flexed his own fingers against his palms and pretended that was the body he was responsible for. Clara hovered by the door, her presence a silent hinge that refused to be ornamental. If Adrian stepped forward without permission, he knew her arm would appear across his chest like a firm seatbelt. Not to restrain, to measure. Pulse? Patel asked. Faint, the nurse said. Thready? Again, Patel said. The compressor leaned in with reverent violence. The monitor decided to remember what electricity could be. A sinus rhythm, insulting in its ordinariness, staggered into being and then steadied. The room obeyed the unwritten law of codes. No applause. Relief must pretend to be quiet. Good, Patel said, voice softening without yielding. Bag, pressers. Let's keep this borrowed future for a bit. He looked up again at Adrian. Report? He asked, as if either of them had been taking notes a court would admire. "Reasons to continue," Adrian said. "You collected them at each interval without bragging." Patel nodded once, already turning back to the living. "We're even," he said. "You taught me the posterior corridor, I just taught you the hallway." It was unfair how quickly the body on the bed resumed being a patient instead of a predicate. The team dispersed. The crash cart closed its mouth. Adrian stepped out into the corridor. He found a window. It gave him nothing but light, which was fine. He was trying to be a man who didn't demand metaphors from glass. Clara stood beside him and didn't speak. They watched their reflections fail to compete with the outside. "You did well," she said finally. "I did nothing," he said, which, for once, did not demean restraint. It recorded it. "You practiced," she corrected, channeling Henley without claiming it. He nodded. "It hurts." "I know," she said, and didn't insist it meant he was growing. Patel joined them a minute later, his face resuming its human topography now that heroics were no longer demanded. "He'll go to ICU," Patel said. "No thanks to you, which is the correct distribution." "It is Ben." Adrian met the younger man's eyes. "Thank you for not making me useful." Patel's mouth did a quick impression of humor. "It was tempting," he said. "But you looked like a man trying to keep a promise, and I have a soft spot for people fighting habit." They stood there a moment, mutual in their quiet. Then Patel glanced at Clara and the level case under her arm. "Are you two renovating something I should worry about?" "A wall," Clara said. "In an apartment. In a life." "Good," Patel said. "Start with load-bearing." They left the hospital without collecting anything they hadn't brought in. Outside, the sky had chosen the color of forgiveness only because the weather had no imagination, a neutral gray that made all buildings equal. They walked home slower than they'd arrived. At the corner, Adrian's phone vibrated. A message from Henley. "How does the door jamb feel when you're guilty?" He typed back, "Like a guard who knows my face and lets me in anyway." A beat. Then, "Come by at 6 if you can. Bring one object you touched today that surprised you by letting you." He texted, "Okay, I'll bring a level." "Of course you will," she replied a second later, which made him feel both seen and indicted. Back home, the apartment accepted them, though it eyed the hospital on their shoes. They took their coats off like people who had agreed not to flee soon. Clara set the level on the counter carefully, as if it could bruise. "Load-bearing," she said, tapping the hinge line. "What exactly is this holding up?" "Everything I don't want to collapse but won't reinforce with lies," he said. It came too quickly to be rehearsed. She exhaled a laugh so small it preferred to exist as a thought. "Good. Then we add another legend entry." She uncapped a pencil and, beneath red self, wrote, "Black Promise." He wanted to argue that promises didn't deserve colors, they deserved silence. He wanted to argue that coloring them black read as threat. He said nothing. He nodded. "Now feed the wall," she said again, her voice making the work ritual instead of task. "What didn't you want it to hear?" He told it about the code, about not moving, about wanting to down to the bones under the names, about the moment when the rhythm returned, how it had felt like watching someone else be allowed to be competent. He'd told it the part he wasn't proud of, that a small, embarrassed half of him missed the voltage in his own chest when he shocked a heart. He expected the paper to remain paper. Instead, the room changed pressure by a degree. His ears reported a pop deep in the tubes. He blinked. He laughed once, surprised. "What?" Clara asked. The building forgave me faster than I did, he said. I need to learn its pace. She didn't ask him to explain. She traced her finger along the hinge, a gesture more intimate than any they had managed yet. Henley? She asked. At 6, he said. She wants me to bring something that let me touch it. Bring the level, Clara said. It returned your hands to themselves when the room tried to make them hover. He picked it up. The bubble found its little meadow as if soothed by the firm grip. He thought of how many instruments he had held that felt like extensions of will. The level did not extend will, it corrected it. Mara texted then, It's still quiet. Noon and now. I vacuumed the hallway and the dust didn't taste like river. I don't know how to name this without making it leave. He answered, Name it hallway. Not miracle. Let it be a place you travel, not a thing you owe. I'll come by tomorrow if you want. I can bring a copy of a map he made. Her reply arrived minutes later, as if she'd needed to put her hand on a doorknob to answer. Tomorrow, afternoon. Bring the map, and bring silence, if you can carry it. He put his phone down. The way her messages arrived, tentative, precise, taught him more about surgery than the last 2 conferences he'd attended. He wrote a new line under legend, silence, not absence, a tool. Clara watched his handwriting slow. A sign she'd learned meant sincerity, not exhaustion. I need to go, she said. Residents will think I've defected to the humanities. Tell them you're learning load-bearing guilt, he said. She smiled. They'll ask if that's on the boards. She gathered her case. At the door she paused. You did well, she said again, riskier this time because it acknowledged a debt between them. So did you, he said. Thank you for standing like a seatbelt. You're welcome, she said. Try to touch 5 objects and none of them sharp. Copy, he said. She left. The door closed with the same smallest click, a discipline the lock had adopted from them. He looked at the wall. The graph waited. He took the black pencil and marked a point on the hinge at day 1. Then he marked another, just above it. It's not cheating, he said to the empty room. It's accumulation. The room did not argue. At 5:30, he slid the level into his bag and walked to Henley's. The brick building was learning his weight on its stairs, a fact that would have unnerved him a week ago and now felt like a reasonable exchange. I will let you memorize me. In return, teach me where to place my feet. Henley opened her door before he knocked. You brought the level, she said, and a face that looks less like polished bone. And Metternich. I watched a heart remember its duty, he said, while practicing mine. Come in, she said. The room has been waiting to see what you'd bring. He's Saturday. She did not admire the level. She placed it on the table carefully, as one puts a sleeping child down when you know its parents are tired. What surprised you by letting you? She asked. The level, he said, and a window. Which window? Any, he said. The hospitals, my apartments, even the ones in streets that don't exist on a boy's paper. I expected them to demand metaphor. Today, they just made rooms honest about their light. Good, she said. Windows that don't pressure language are load-bearing too. He shows tanned. He told her about the code, about not moving, about Patel, the sentence that had saved him, be furniture. He said it aloud and felt its shape in his mouth like a pill that wanted to be chewed. You chose the terms of staying, she said. For once, he said. And the voice? Still says we proceed sometimes, he said. It sounds less like a dare and more like a calendar entry. And the blade? In the drawer, he said. I touched the knob. I let me. I closed it gently enough to be trusted next time. Homework, she said. He waited, suspecting he would be asked to do something that would make him visible to himself. Write 2 letters, she said. One to the boy, not to persuade him, not to keep him, to inform him. Here is what the living do when you aren't watching. One to your father, not to apologize, to translate. Here is what you were saying when the kettle was a son. Bring them to me. We'll decide if they belong to you or to Mara or to the fire. He nodded. His chest did that irritating, honest thing where it warmed without permission. Can I include maps? You'll be unable not to, she said. He smiled and, without planning it, said thank you. For what? For treating architecture like ethics, he said. It helps, she nodded, as if he had correctly identified the instrument in a symphony's low register. Go home, she said. Touch the furniture, right. If you need the room to behave before you begin, you know where it lives. He left feeling less like a man who had avoided cutting and more like a man who had agreed to build. On the walk back, he passed the park where a path had been labeled "Shh" in one world and "Louder Please" in another. He took neither. He walked the middle, which had no name. He decided to name it anyway and let the boy be right retroactively. At home, the wall drank the light the way soil drinks a first rain. He set the level down. He pulled paper from the tube and began to write. Dear Elias, today a heart refused to remember and then did. It was not my hands. They stayed where my promises asked them to stay. Your maps teach me that corridors are verbs. We moved through one together, all of us. A doctor who did the shocks, a nurse who counted, a team that did not brag. If you are staying, stay with terms. Keep a hallway. Tell noise its place. If you are returning, take the path with no anesthesia and give it a better name. Your mother vacuumed a river out of the carpet today. I think she is learning the sound of a house that isn't trying to warn her. I will visit tomorrow with one of your cities. We will practice silence that knows how to hold a door open without making it a shrine. And he folded the letter, not to send, but because folds make paper remember bodies. Then he wrote another. Dear Dad, you were right to relocate meaning when the labels failed. Spoon was a doctor because a doctor brought you a mouth that did not humiliate you. Kettle was a son because I was too hot and shapeless and too often at a boil. I should have thanked you for making metaphors into furniture before I went to school and learned to grade them. Today I watched a man name electricity back into a person. I was furniture. I'm practicing being useful in that shape. Your chair is still in my head, the one you pretended was too stiff so I would see you suffer elegantly. I'm letting it be stiff now, and letting you not be elegant. The room adjusts. I'm learning to. Adrian. He put both letters on the counter beneath the level, as if asking the bubble to judge their balance. It approved of the table, the paper, or the position of his heart. He couldn't be sure. After midnight, he opened the drawer, not to touch the blade but to give the hinge practice. He closed it softly. The apartment kept memorizing him, which had become less like surveillance and more like care. As he turned out the lights, the wall settled, a thin sound like paper, deciding to accept tape as law. In the unaided dark, the axis remained visible for a few breaths, ghost chalk, then yielded to black. He lay on the couch again, in the hallway he had claimed as a room. The voice came once, at the exact volume a parent uses when a child is almost asleep. We proceed. Yes, he said, and the answer did not require bravery and did not advertise pain. With terms, Chapter 6. Letters the house can read. He woke to the smell of paper and coffee, the small liturgies that made morning look persuaded rather than natural. The wall received his eyes and gave back organization. The circle with its oppositions, the hinge like a seam a careful tailor trusted, the small house with a chimney heart that now possessed neighbors. Beneath the level, the two letters lay where he'd left them, their folds crisp, their ink dry, their obligations intact. He touched each with a fingertip as if checking for fever. They had cooled into artifacts. A message waited from Henley. Bring them exactly as they are. Don't revise on the walk. If your hand reaches for a pen, put it on a door jamb instead. Mara. Later. Afternoon is still good. 3. I've put his maps on the dining table. The house is tentative, as if someone told it a joke it hasn't decided to laugh at. He wrote back to each, "Okay." It was the only word that knew how to be both consent and boundary. He copied one of Elias's maps, the neighborhood of verbs, onto clean grid paper, preserving the shape but letting the lines breathe. He did not fix spelling or straighten alleys. He added nothing of his own except a small legend in the corner. Black dot equals where a grown-up chooses to listen. He put the dot nowhere. The dot would be wherever Mara stood. At noon, the hospital called his name just by existing. He ignored it with discipline so precise it hurt. He ate a piece of toast without diagnosing it. He washed the plate and put it where plates go in houses that plan to be visited. Then he took the letters, the copy of the map, and the level, and left. The city had found one of its neutral days, the kind that makes mercy seem like a municipal service. On the train, he sat beside a woman whose hands rested palm up in her lap as if waiting to be read. He wanted to tell her about chimneys and door jambs and hinges and the generosity of objects. He wanted to tell no one anything. He watched his reflection jitter by in the black glass of the tunnel and practiced not making a metaphor of it. Mara's building wore its age openly. Wood that had endured and was tired of proving it. A stair that asked you to consider your weight. On the landing, a narrow window that had never been cleaned enough to forget its job. He placed his hand on the banister and let it memorize him. He knocked. Mara opened the door as if she had been standing one breath away for an hour. The house behind her did the same exhausted trick as the stair. Endured, insisting it had once been younger with witnesses. He stepped inside and let the air measure him. "Thank you for coming," she said without performing gratitude. "Thank you for asking," he said without performing humility. The dining table held a geography of paper, a briar patch of neighborhoods and rivers and alleys, and instructions written in a boy's exacting hand. Some pages had food stains, some had fingerprints, faint loops and whorls like chalk on a blackboard. The house had read these maps more times than any adult had. "Do you want tea?" she asked. "Or quiet? Or a chair?" "Yes," he said, and thought his father would have liked the answer. They made tea. They carried silence to the table like a third cup and set it between them. He unfolded the copy he'd made and slid it toward her. "He would have liked this," she said, tracing the legend with a finger that had no interest in demanding touch back. "He liked when grown-ups decided to be specific." She tapped the corner. "You left the dot empty. The house will put it where it belongs," he said, her mouth bent, almost a laugh, almost a proof. "Do you know what I did this morning?" she asked. "I opened the bathroom cabinet and took everything out and wiped down the shelves and threw away the expired things and put the rest back lined up like soldiers, and none of it felt like bargaining. It felt like moving, not on, just around. "You read to the house," he said. "With actions." She nodded. "I found the little bottle of the shampoo he hated. He used to call it the loud one. I almost cried for how accurate he was, and then I felt stupid for almost crying about soap, and then I didn't feel stupid anymore, and I kept my hands moving." She was not telling him grief. She was giving him protocol. He honored it. She glanced at the letters. "Did you bring something?" He placed them on the table as one places instruments on a sterile field, deliberately aware of sequence. He offered the one addressed to Elias. "May I read?" "Yes," she said, and the house tilted its head. He read the letter as he had written it, refusing to add adjectives to assuage his conscience. When he reached the line about silence that holds a door without making it a shrine, her breath caught but did not turn into sound. When he finished, she touched the paper as if it could bruise. "Leave it here," she said. For the hallway, he slid it 6 inches toward the edge, a small gesture that made the difference between belonging and visiting. He did not cry. The moment would not allow the theater. "And the other?" she asked. He unfolded the letter to his father and read it too. Her face altered with each sentence, not in large ways, but like a room learns a new smell. When he said, "Kettle was a son because I was too hot and shapeless and too often at a boil," she looked down at her hands and made a sound that belonged to no category he had words for. "I didn't mean to say that aloud to you," he said, suddenly unsteady. "It's not to me," she said. "It's to the exact place in this house where kettle stopped being an object. My husband started calling the radiator boy for a week after Elias died. I corrected him once, with the efficiency of a woman who wants to keep the floors clean. I wish I hadn't. I wish I'd let the house get it wrong with us." "There are no wrong nouns in certain rooms," he said. "Only nouns with shock. Take some time." "He teaches that, doesn't he?" she said softly. "Still?" He nodded. They sat with it. The tea cooled. A footstep sounded in the hall. A man appeared with the posture of someone obeying a script the room handed him nightly, shoulders forward, face careful. He had the look of a person grief had given older bones to. This would be Mara's husband. He stopped when he saw Adrian and recalibrated to a new syntax of politeness. "This is Dr. Vale," Mara said. "Adrian, he came to bring maps." His eyes flicked to the table, maps, letters, the level, all as suspicious to a husband as strange instruments are to a patient. He nodded once, cautious, as if not to wake anything that had agreed to sleep. "I'm Jonas," he said. His voice carried the roughness of old cutlery. "The house told me you'd come." "Did it?" Adrian asked, surprised into honesty. Jonas shrugged, a small, private gesture. The heat came on at a different hour. The radiator clanked like it was changing its mind. "I've started calling that a message because it makes me nicer to live with." "We're practicing terms," Mara said, "the staying kind." Jonas looked at Adrian the way a father looks at a teacher who might be good for his child, but might also believe he is the curriculum. Adrian lowered his eyes first. "The maps helped," Jonas said after a moment, to Mara more than to Adrian. "Last night I dreamed of a hallway where someone kept vacuuming and the vacuum didn't make the lines in the carpet angry. It sounds stupid." "It sounds like red," Mara said, and gestured at the legend on Elias's page. "Red equals places where I don't have to be brave." They both smiled in a way that made the table the right height again. Jonas touched the edge of the level, not picking it up, just letting it acknowledge him. "That a tool or a guest?" "Both," Adrian said. "It corrects instead of cuts. I'm trying to learn that division. Jonas nodded in a way only men who have misused sharp things understand. Stay for lunch? He asked, the invitation an extension of a hallway rather than a test. Adrian glanced at Mara. She tilted her head as though making room for the answer. He stayed. They ate the kind of food grief tolerates, bread that doesn't object, soup that arrives already gentle. Conversation threaded itself along the table's edge, neither avoiding Elias nor consecrating him. The house learned new vocabulary. Spoon that meant spoon, kettle that meant kettle, radiator that meant winter and a sun, and some heat that refused metaphor. It held both politely. Tell us something boring about your job, Jonas said at one point, like a man trying to reintroduce sunlight to a room that has lived on lamplight. Inventory, Adrian said without flinching, counting things that aren't dramatic. Gauze pads, suture packets. How many seconds a scrub nurse can keep her hands in the air before someone helps with the gown. He let his voice soften. How easily attention is mistaken for miracle. Mara smiled at that, and he saw her mouth remember a shape it had been asked to retire too early. He would have liked you, she said, and the sentence arrived without debt or threat. Then I will try to like me on his behalf, he said, and Jonas made a sound that passed for approval among men who measure feelings for a living. After, he cleared the dishes with an attentiveness that felt like a white coat done in porcelain. He did not overperform gentleness. He let competence be visible. When he set the last plate in the rack, the house gave him a very small permission. The radiator sighed the way old animals do when someone sits in the right place. In the dining room again, he slid the copy of the map fully to Mara's side. Keep it, he said. Add to it. Draw your own legend. Put the dot where you are when you want it to count. ELN par. She nodded and tucked the paper beneath a ceramic bowl the color of unripe pears. What about the letters? Yours, he said, then corrected himself. His and yours. He left the one to Elias under the bowl with the map. He tucked the letter to his father back into his bag. Some maps belong to one house at a time. On the way out, he placed his palm flat against the hallway wall. Not secretly, not theatrically, just for the record. The wall warmed a little, as if admitting that human hands are radiators too. Tomorrow, Mara said as he reached the door. You don't have to come. But if you do, bring your refusal again. The house likes it. I will, he said, and meant it. Jonas shook his hand with a pressure that tested and accepted in one motion. He left them to their afternoon, to their negotiations with quiet. Outside, he did not feel lighter. He felt aligned. He went directly to Henley's. He did not rehearse his voice in the stairwell. She answered before he knocked again. You kept the schedule, she said, which for her meant you kept a promise to yourself in public. I brought them, he said, laying the letters on the small table, the level beside them like a baseline that neither overperforms nor quits. Read me the edits you didn't make, she said. He smiled. You are obscene, he said, and read them as they were. When he finished, she did not offer him virtue or diagnosis. She looked at the level. You're learning to be corrected in a way that does not feel like humiliation, she said. That's new for you. I preferred being right to being oriented, he said. Now I prefer doors that can open and remain doors. And the house? It read the letters, he said simply. She nodded. Assignment? She asked, soft so as not to startle the part of him that hated being given homework. Please, he said. Write a third letter, she said. To the man in the bed today who returned to his rhythm without you, tell him what you did not take. Be precise. People deserve inventories of what they have been spared. He let the instruction touch bone. Yes, he said. And then, she said, choose an object in your apartment you haven't used since you moved in, not because you don't need it, but because you haven't consented to what it asks you to be. Use it. Report back. If it's a musical instrument, play it badly. If it's a pan that requires patience, burn one omelet. If it's a chair that faces a window, sit without a book. Make a mess the house can forgive you for. He laughed, grateful for the stupidity of omelets. Copy, he said, and saluted a protocol that would not be insulted by military metaphors. On the walk home, he allowed himself one flourish. He took a route that crossed a bridge just to hear the sound his steps made on grating. The city rang him like a small bell, and he did not pretend it was an epiphany. He let it be metal and pressure and a rhythm, ordinary and good. At his door, he held the knob an extra second so the house could keep up. Inside, he set the level down. He taped a new sheet to the wall. He drew in the grid lines Clara had brought, light, like a reminder of music under speech. He wrote a date near the hinge. He marked 2 points with the black pencil and did not apologize for the pride he felt in the small stack of days. Then he wrote, Dear Mr. Ferris, bed 17, you returned to a rhythm without my hands today. I would like to tell you what I did not take. I did not take the pressure on your sternum from the resident who had the exact right depth. I did not take the decision ladder from the attending who chose wisely how much electricity to ask your heart to remember. I did not take the glory that attaches itself to survival like a barnacle. I did not take the story from your family, if there is one yet. I did not take from the nurse her gift for counting with a voice that makes time behave. I did not take your right to be tired of all of us. I stood. I watched. I stored the names of the people who were there so the building can keep them if you forget. If you never meet me, that will mean we did it correctly. If you do, I will be furniture until you ask me to be instrument. He folded the letter. He did not know whether it would ever be sent. The writing was the sending. He looked around his apartment for the object he had failed on purpose. He found the small cast-iron pan on the top shelf, the one he had inherited from a woman who loved him once for his promise, and then stopped when promise learned to impersonate ground. He had kept it because of its weight, and then punished it for asking to be treated like a body. Heated slowly, oiled with respect, cleaned without soap, dried with a towel that knew how to be patient. He pulled it down. He held it like an argument he was ready to lose. The omelet burned exactly as instructed. He ate it anyway, grateful for the crisp edges that tasted like failure cooked to safety. He washed the pan with water only, dried it with the cloth he tended the scalpel with, and watched it darken back into itself. His hands knew how to do this. The house watched and took notes. He returned to the wall. Clara's axis waited. He added to the legend, Brown Domestic Mercy. He smiled despite himself. The room did not smile back. It performed the better service of making space. His phone buzzed. Patel. Ferris is extubated, trying to talk. Keeps asking for the guy who told me to be furniture. I didn't tell him that guy is you. Should I? Adrian typed, Tell him the furniture says hi. If he still asks tomorrow, I'll bring him a letter. Patel sent back a single punctuation mark. The period of a man who approves but will not admit the warm thing behind his ribs has pronouns. Clara wrote a minute after, I added blue dot equals where we agree to be wrong first to the legend on my copy. Also, please send me a photo of your burned omelet for research. He sent the photo. She responded with a picture of the carpenter's level propped on a flour tin, the bubble steady. We are oriented toward mistakes that don't scar. Henley, last. Good. Tomorrow we inventory your sharp things and name them after soft ones. Bring the pan if you're willing to let another room memorize it. He looked at the drawer that held the scalpel. He opened it. He took the instrument out and, for the first time since he began this ritual, set it on the counter, not as a threat or a relic, but as a fact. He wrote on a small strip of tape and stuck it to the steel. Hinge. He placed the pan beside it. He wrote on a second strip, Promise. He laughed. Quietly and without requiring the house to join, he turned off the lights. The wall stayed visible one heartbeat longer than it should have, the way cinema does when the projector is reluctant to admit the reel is over. He lay on the couch in the hallway he had claimed and let the day rearrange itself. Tea, maps, radiator that thought it was a boy, bread, letters that were also doors, a level correcting everyone without complaint, a brown pan practicing forgiveness on a stovetop that finally asked the right questions. The voice came again quieter than the last time, as if embarrassed by its earlier theatrics, and it did not say a command. It said an address. Adrian, it said. Yes, he answered. Present. There was a pause in which the house decided whether to learn his attendance by heart. Good, the voice said, is greater than that's how corridors start. He slept with both hands open, palms up, as if waiting to be read and prepared, for once, to accept the interpretation that arrived. Chapter 7. Inventory of Edges. The morning arrived with the stubborn dignity of objects that believe in use. The pan sat on the counter, dark and rested, as if overnight it had converted heat into advice. Beside it, the scalpel wore its strip of tape. Hinge. He touched both with equal pressure. As Henley had instructed, so the hand would learn, there are gradations between reverence and control. The wall received his eyes like a witness who had slept and was now ready to testify. Points on the axis. Stay. Return. The small house, with its chimney heart, the hinge line dividing promise from the old appetite for proof. A new note in the legend he didn't remember writing, White, what we let remain unnamed. The handwriting was his. The decision was a quiet astonishment. On the phone, a text from Patel at 6:07 a.m. Ferris slept. Asked again about furniture guy. I told him you write letters to people you don't intend to offend. He laughed. Laughter equals good prognostic sign per my very scientific rubric. ICU wants to wean his pressers today. Another from Clara. A photograph of a window with a smear she'd cleaned, leaving a clear oval the size of a face. Evidence of light behaving. Mara. Morning. The house made a noise that sounded like a chair being pulled out for someone. It startled me, and then didn't. Come later if you have maps. Henley. Bring your edges. 10 a.m. And the pan. The room promises to misjudge neither. He replied to each with, okay, because sometimes obedience is a scaffolding you build before you install trust. He packed the pan, wrapped in a towel that had memorized hospital corridors. The scalpel, sealed inside a plastic sleeve, he taped shut. In a ritual that resembled a superstition, the letters Ferris's among them, and a clean copy of one of Elias's cities. He left with the feeling of a man carrying fragile weather. Henley's building greeted him with brick. It had decided he was a regular and arranged its air accordingly. She opened the door without smiling, which, in her vocabulary, was affection. "You brought the edges," she said. "And a stove that remembers how to ask questions," he said, raising the pan. "Good. Put them down. Sit. We inventory. And be too." He set the pan and scalpel on the small table between them like specimens at a museum of necessary dangers. Henley took a legal pad from a drawer not to hide behind, but to keep the ritual from becoming theology. "Sharp things," she said. "Name them and then rename them. The first name is what they have done to you. The second is what you intend to ask of them." He swallowed. Honesty liked to catch in the throat like a seed. "Scalpel," he said. "First name, permission." He paused. "Second name, boundary." Henley's pen made a small, appreciative sound. "Next?" "Words," he said, surprising himself. "First name, disguise. Second name, door." "Good," she said. "Keep going." Silence. "First name, punishment. Second name, container." "Time?" she offered. He laughed without glamour. "Time. First name, ladder to a platform that does not exist. Second name, room that can be re-entered. Control," she said, and let the word taste metallic. Control. First name, intoxication. Second name, climate. "Shame," she said, almost gently. "Shame," he echoed. "First name, knife I kept in my mouth. Second name, label I can remove without losing the jar." "Good," she said again, the syllable working like a stitch that didn't announce itself. She tapped the pan. "And this?" He touched the cast iron's rim with a finger that had learned to respect temperature without flinching. "Pan. First name, instruction," I resented. "Second name, patience that forgives flame." Henley's eyes did that alert softening he trusted. "Read the last one again," she said. He did. The room held it the way cloth holds water, changing shape slightly, not leaving a stain. "Now," she said, "tell me what happens to your body when you stand in a room with both of those, a nod to knife and pan, and no one expects a performance." He closed his eyes and let the list arrive without editing. My hands stop auditioning. My jaw unclenches enough for words to be nouns before they are instruments. The back of my neck cools. My knees remember bending is not collapse. My mouth empties of knives and cried. "Keep that list," she said. "You will need it when the hospital insists it's a stage." He nodded. "And now," she said, as if pivoting in a dance both patient and exact, "tell me the thing you didn't plan to admit today." He tried to decorate the truth and felt her watching the ribbon, not the gift. He sighed. "I miss the high," he said. "Not always. Not like a man who wants his old poison back. But I miss the way a room goes silent when you call a heart by its name and it answers. I miss deciding and feeling forgiven by the monitor." Henley did not flinch, because it would have taught his confession to think itself venom. "You're talking about agency," she said, "not glory." "Hadedia mia," he shook his head. "Both, the honest and the embarrassing. I miss being congratulated for the brutality of my competence." She leaned forward slightly. "Good," she said. "Do not pretend the embarrassing is a lesser truth. Name it properly or it will practice under an alias." She uncapped her pen as if prepping an injection. "Homework for this hour. Write 2 sentences that can be true at the same time. 1. I am good at this. 2. They are not mine. Put them anywhere you can see from far away." He smiled, because she had given him something that felt like a suture he wanted to wear. "I'll put them on the wall," he said. Above the hinge, "Bring me a photograph," she said, "and the letter to Ferris. Read it to me." He did. She listened with the clinical tenderness that had convinced him to trust her. When he finished, she nodded. "Deliver it," she said. "Whether or not he reads it, deliver it. We learn different literacies by being offered them." He stood to go and then stopped. "Henley," he said, testing her name on a frequency he hadn't used before. "Thank you for letting my edges keep their edges while learning new names." "You're welcome," she said. "Go see the man who didn't need your hands, then go see the house that does." "Hey, take say dart." He left with the pan under his arm like a textbook, the scalpel zipped away, the phrases already whispering to the wall. "I am good at this. They are not mine." The ICU was having an ordinary day, which meant all the machines were singing arguments and all the rooms were practicing mercy on controllable schedules. Ferris lay in a bed that had learned his shape with the demoralizing intimacy of recovery. His skin had the tone of someone who has been asked to come back and is still making up his mind. Patel stood at the foot, reading numbers the way weather people read sky. He glanced up, caught Adrian in the doorway, and did not perform surprise. "He's yours," Patel said, and meant for a few minutes, with terms. He stepped out, leaving the room to be small enough for two. Ferris opened his eyes, the lids making the dry sound of paper that has been folded too many times. "You're the furniture," he said, voice roughened, mouth grinning as if to apologize for living. "I am," Adrian said, "and I brought you something to set on me." He held up the letter, no ceremony. He read it, because Ferris's face said, "Talk to me like I am a person too tired to be proud." When he reached the line about not taking the nurse's counting, Ferris laughed and then winced. A man learning how many muscles were implicated in joy. "She counts like a metronome that loves me," he said. "She keeps time against panic." "She does," Adrian said. "And it is hers." Ferris turned his head on the pillow, hunting for comfort like a dog settling. "You surgeons," he said. "You like to be gods because you're afraid of being furniture that gets called shabby." Adrian felt the accuracy land where compliments couldn't reach. "I'm learning upholstery," he said. Slowly, Ferris nodded, pleased with the image. He closed his eyes as if auditioning sleep. "Leave the letter," he said, not because he intended to read it, but because hospital rooms like props. Adrian placed it on the bedside table beneath a plastic cup that had decided to be heavy exactly when needed. He stood there a moment, wanting to offer a promise and choosing not to. "Goodbye for now," he said. "For now," Ferris echoed, and was already half absent in the appropriate direction. In the hall, Patel leaned against a handrail that had collected human oils for a decade. "That was decent," he said. "I still prefer when you cut people beautifully, but this was decent." "Thank you," Adrian said. "You know Morgan has a board review this afternoon," Patel added, "like a weather report you might foolishly ignore. Your case, the boy, it keeps pretending to be over and then not being over." "Of course it does," Adrian said. He imagined the conference room, the slide, the arterial nick that might have been and might not have. He felt the old tremor of usefulness press at his skin from inside, as if trying to put itself back on. "I won't attend," he said aloud. "Good," Patel said. "Be absent in the places that want your pain for decoration." They parted the way colleagues do, efficient, grateful, unwilling to become sentimental while wearing scrubs. He walked to Mara's by a route that crossed no bridges. He wanted streets. He wanted intersections named after conditional verbs. The house opened to him without drama. which he had begun to recognize as a courtesy earned, not luck. Mara had arranged the dining table differently, maps sorted into piles that a librarian could love. The copy he'd left was on top, weighted by the green bowl. A new dot had been added in pencil, not black, blue, where we agree to be wrong first. "I like your legend," he said. "It's Elias's," she said, though he could see the adult hand. "Or it will be until I forgive myself for writing in his cities." She looked at him, aware that grief makes lieutenants of guests. "Did you bring more?" He pulled out another map, a small one, just a staircase drawn in profile, each step labeled with a word he'd heard 100 times on different wards. Wait, almost, not yet, now, careful, again, slow, now, okay. He placed it like a talisman near the kitchen. "Stairs," she said, touching the drawn banister. "Good. Jonas trips on good days. It will help to have the house name the steps. He obeys words better than gravity." "Most men do," Adrian said, and she laughed for real this time, a sound with muscles. He felt it in his own ribs. "Tea?" she asked. Then, frowning, "No, something else." She opened a cupboard and took down 2 glasses that had kept their clarity despite dishwashers and arguments. She poured water, cold as permission. "For now," she said, and they drank with the solemnity that ordinary choices carry in houses that have learned not to worship crisis. "I saw Ferris," he said. He laughed like a man whose sternum knows it survived. "I hadn't noticed how laughter hurts when a body is newly returned." "Hearts forget comedy first," she said. "Then they learn it again from the noises rooms make." They stood in the doorway to the hallway and listened to the radiator. It clunked. Not river, not boy. Just heat announcing itself clumsily. The kind of noise you forgive because it keeps the house humane. Jonas appeared, hair unbothered, shirt that looked like it had learned the shapes of his shoulders during a long winter. "You brought stairs," he said. "I like a map that acknowledges gravity." "And a level," Adrian said, lifting the instrument from his bag like a gift for a suspicious uncle. Jonas took it with care. He set it on the mantel. The bubble drifted, frowned, and then centered as if indulging them. He nodded once. "It says our house leans a little toward the street." "I already knew," he added, "because soup crawls in bowls if you don't hold them." "Now you can tell the soup you have data," Mara said. They ate bread again because bread is a promise with chew. After, Adrian unfolded his letter to Elias and asked if he might read it aloud to the hallway itself, not to perform for the walls what a human voice does to air when it refuses to demand miracle. Mara said yes. Jonas listened from the kitchen, pretending to be interested in the sink's philosophy. Adrian read with his back to the maps, facing the corridor. He spoke the sentence about silence as a door holder without shrines. He said the lines he'd written about returning without anesthesia. He said the part about staying with terms. When he finished, he realized his hand had found the door jamb and was resting there, lightly, as if keeping vigil for someone who had the key and the right. The radiator gave a soft, arrhythmic pop. The house did not applaud. It applied. Mara placed a hand flat on the wall. "Thank you," she said to it, to him, to the practice. "Tomorrow, bring nothing, just your refusal. We'll see if the house knows it now by heart." He left them to their afternoon, less careful with the knob than before, because he had decided to trust metal to forgive. Outside, a child rode a scooter past him with the focused seriousness of a surgeon. He wished the child a long series of mornings where speed did not become seduction. At home, he climbed the stairs with patience. The building had acquired a personality, elder, opinionated, fond of knees. In the apartment, he taped a new strip of paper above the hinge and wrote, in thick, obedient letters, "I am good at this. They are not mine." He stepped back. He let the words share a wall with the map of his guilt. He felt, for a moment, like a man who had replaced glass with load-bearing truth. He pulled the legal pad from his bag and wrote out Henley's inventory again, slower, as if the pen could respect the weight of each renaming. He added one, mirror. First name, proof. Second name, witness. He carried the pan to the sink, oiled it lightly, heated it until it shone the way some things shine when they are about to become communal again. He let it cool. He dried it as if writing with cloth. He returned it to the stove like a plate at an altar that had learned to feed. Clara texted, "Morgan survived the board review without biting anyone. He said to tell you the room behaved like adults for once. Also, Resident Martinez cried in the stairwell and then stopped. We are trending toward dignity," he replied. "I taped a truth above the hinge. Bring your bubble. I think it wants to judge us." She arrived an hour later, hair half-pinned, exhaustion worn like a credential. She put the level on the strip of paper. The bubble found center and paused there with visible pride. "What are we measuring?" she asked. "Accuracy without ownership," he said. "Sounds like a new subspecialty," she said. "We should make T-shirts." They stood under the sentence until their necks complained. Then they sat on the floor with their backs against the couch, the way students rest in lecture halls when the content finally matters more than posture. "I have something," Clara said, voice cautious, like a hand reaching into a bag with a snake and a rope. "I didn't want to tell you until I wasn't going to make it about me." He waited, learning that silence can be a chair you offer. "I was with a patient today, a woman named Tessa, complicated meningioma. She's scared in the way smart people are, inventing futures that are statistically improbable but emotionally efficient. I drew her one of your maps, not the circle, not the hinge, a hallway with a door marked after." She breathed. She calmed down, not completely, but enough to look at me like the world might continue without permission. He exhaled something he hadn't meant to hold. "Good," he said. And I wrote legend in the corner and realized I didn't know what to put," she said. "So I wrote blue dot equals where we agree to be wrong first." She laughed and said, "So, everywhere?" And then she held my hand like holding wasn't a transaction. He turned to look at her. Her face, unspectacular and fierce, had the serenity of people who have decided to invest in non-catastrophic forms of adrenaline. "You did that," he said. "Not the map." "I know," she said, "but I've been needing to admit that to someone who could keep me from crowning it as proof." "I'll be your furniture," he said. "You can set that on me." They sat a while longer. The apartment did what good rooms do when people confess carefully. It made itself larger by a degree impossible to measure but necessary to feel. When she left, he returned to the wall and marked a point above day 3. The graph began to look less like performance, more like commitment. He added to the legend, "Orange borrowed courage." He drew a small triangle next to the chimney heart. "Neighbor," the mirror in the bathroom waited. He went to it without fear. He stood, shirt unbuttoned, the faint white seam of his adolescent curiosity visible, the new pencil line of a hinge between stay and return hovering on his sternum only because his mind decided to see it. He lifted a finger and touched the glass. "Witness," he said. The mirror offered a man who was not practicing being loved, only being seen. The old trick did not return. No warm glass that felt like skin, no reflection that moved without consent. Only his face and the room behind it, a pan, a level, a wall with maps, a couch he had allowed to be a hallway. He exhaled. He didn't know he'd been hoping for a haunting. He felt the tiny grief of that and let it pass. The phone vibrated once more. "Morgan, tomorrow, noon. Bring a description of what you are calling a hinge. I'll try not to mock you if you try not to save me." He typed, "Deal." Then, without planning to, "Thank you for smelling rot early." A pause. Then, "It was my job. Also, don't tell anyone I'm sentimental in lowercase." He laughed. He turned off the overheads. The apartment preferred lamps. He lay on the couch again, a choice now, not a bruise. He listened for the voice, and when it did not come, he said the thing himself, without shame, without ceremony. "We proceed." The house answered in radiators and wood, in the tiny pop of cooling metal, in the invisible movement of air when a body surrenders its heat to sleep. None of it was mystical. All of it was sufficient. He closed his eyes with his hands open, palms up, ready to be read, and no longer afraid of interpretation. Outside, someone pulled a chair back in some other apartment. The sound arrived through the wall like a polite knock from a neighbor you haven't met yet. He smiled, trusting the hinge to hold while doors learned their new names. Chapter 8. The hinge speaks in plurals. Morning had the color of paper left under a lamp, warmed, a little brittle, ready to be written on if you were careful. He stood in front of the wall like a student facing a blackboard he had pledged allegiance to. Above the line he'd taped last night, the declarative sentences waited. "I am good at this. They are not mine." The bubble in the carpenter's level sat over the hinge, obedient and pleased, as if accuracy could be domesticated without becoming domestication. He touched the paper with the back of his hand, a small vow against ownership. There were messages. Patel, with a photo of Ferris sitting up, mouth tilted in irritation at the soup he'd been given. Clara, with a snapshot of a resident's notes containing a small drawn hallway labeled "After." Hendley, with a reminder, "Bring the pan next time." It and I are in quiet agreement, and a second line. "Count 5 hinges in your life that aren't on doors." Mara, with 2 words that made the house and him stand straighter, still quiet. At 11, he wrote the hinges. "Sternum, the bone that lets hands meet without entering." Pause. The space before a name, when you decide whether to use it as an address or a weapon. Tape, paper held by something that admits its own impermanence. Level, a bubble trained to find the middle and forgive the rest. Silence, not absence, the doorframe around words. He wrote a 6th because 5 felt stingy. Neck, the place where apology starts when it is honest. At noon he took the train to St. Ecliptica with the pan wrapped like a violin and the scalpel in its sleeve, the strip of tape reading hinge like a label on a wild animal's cage. Not a name, a warning that the bars were there for both of you. Morgan's office leaned on afternoon light. His mentor stood with his back to the window, the posture of a man who lets brightness do the interrogating. He waved Adrian into the chair and did not waste soft phrases. "You brought props," Morgan said, glancing at the wrapped pan and the careful rectangle in plastic. "I brought translations," Adrian said. "Good," Morgan said dryly. "I worried you might bring poems." Saturday. "Describe your hinge." Adrian held his hands an inch apart. fingers curved as if catching water. A hinge is a place where the decision to move does not require violence, he said. It holds two loyalties, stay and go, without making either betrayal. In my work, it's the inch between blade and skin where naming can still prevent cutting. In my life, it's the moment before I let competence become possession. And brace. Morgan studied him with the skepticism that had saved many residents from worshiping their first good outcomes. So, it's a mechanism for restraint. It's also a climate, Adrian said. A way a room learns to hold force without needing to release it. Show me, Morgan said, and meant the thing surgeons always mean. Demonstrate on something that bleeds. Adrian unwrapped the pan. He set it on the desk with care inappropriate to a piece of iron until you admit how much it weighs. He placed the sheathed scalpel beside it. 2 edges, he said. The hinge between them is me today. And yesterday? Morgan asked. Not for theater. Yesterday it was my pride, Adrian said. It did respectable work under an alias. Morgan allowed himself a small exhale that might have applied as humor in a friendlier room. You know the board, he said. You know they spoke your name, and the boys in the same sentences again this morning. They are fond of histories that close. I'm not, Adrian said. I'm fond of hinges. Then tell me where you place one in the Monroe case, Morgan said. You don't need to persuade me. I want to see where you stand when you cut the story into learnable pieces. Adrian folded his hands. He spoke as one might read coordinates. Hinge 1, pre-op. When I made promises I believed in because belief felt cleaner than risk. A hinge is a place where I could have said I don't know and let the uncertainty bear weight instead of hiding it in optimism. Hinge 2, intraoperative. When my hand started to prefer a complication, I could have called that hunger by its name and moved my attention like a light in a hallway, not like a blade. Hinge 3, postoperative hemorrhage. Instead of writing clean notes into a report that would be archived by people who trust fonts, I could have called Mara into the room and asked her to hold his hand while we failed him. A hinge between accuracy and mercy. Hinge 4, after, when I let guilt become a cathedral instead of a corridor. I could have left doors. And now? Morgan asked, soft enough to surprise him. Now there's a 5th hinge, Adrian said, glancing at the strip of paper above his living room map, where I choose not to be useful because usefulness is a high that rots what it touches if you don't rinse it. Morgan stared at him a long time in the way that makes men fidget. He didn't. I'm trying to decide, Morgan said at last, whether you have become religious. I have become architectural, Adrian said. It's cheaper. Morgan's mouth did that nearly smile that satisfied no one and reassured everyone. Bring me your wall tomorrow, he said. A photograph is fine. I need to see what you're building so I can stop pretending not to approve. Tomorrow, Adrian said. And veil, Morgan added, looking suddenly older in a way that had nothing to do with biology. There are doors you'll need to close. Not all hinges deserve to inherit their walls. I know, Adrian said. Good, Morgan said. Now leave before the hospital sees you and thinks it can hire you back into the same room. Adrian stood. At the door he paused. You smelled rot early, he said quietly. Thank you. Don't say things like that, Morgan said without looking up. They'll make me sentimental in lowercase. He walked to the ICU. He did not go in. He stood at the glass like a man trying very hard to be window, not narrator. Ferris slept. The nurse who counted yesterday hummed to herself as she charted. The monitor behaved like a well-trained metronome. He kept his hands in his pockets and did not commit prayer. It felt like the correct shape of reverence. On the street, the city obeyed clocks. He texted Mara, 1 hour. I'll bring nothing. Good, she replied. The house has a new noise. Jonas says it's just the old noise with different grammar. He took a different route than habit recommended, an alley that reminded shoes to check their steps. The light there was narrow but loyal. He arrived at their door on time because being on time felt like a hinge too. Mara opened with a face that had altered discreetly since yesterday. Some catastrophe had not arrived, and she was practicing the muscles that remain when anticipation fails to pay rent. The hallway behind her made a sound that belonged to heating, not to haunting. He entered, empty-handed. We try your experiment, she said. Nothing. Refusal as a bouquet. Okay, he said. We stand together and do not demand result. If something happens, it's atmosphere. Ain't Shaz. They stood in the corridor at the center of the apartment, where the radiator had once sounded like a boy, and then like a river, and now like iron, remembering it had a job without metaphor. Jonas joined them with the gravity men reserved for doorframes. Name something you aren't waiting for, Jonas said suddenly, voice low. Mara closed her eyes. A sign, she said. I am not waiting for a sign. Name something you can't afford to be right about, Adrian said. Jonas swallowed. That he would have grown out of all his softness, he said. That the world would have forced him mean, and I am spared that. I cannot afford to be right about that. They didn't touch. The air did it for them. The radiator clicked once, like a polite neighbor clearing a throat to excuse itself past you in a narrow hall. Thank you, Mara whispered, to the nothing that had become a room. We accept that you are heat and not spelling. We accept that you will be here when we forget redundancy is mercy. They stood until the standing felt like a task completed. Then they sat at the table with water and bread, the table where maps waited under the bowl. Marionettes cut from strings do not fall. They discover they had bones all along. I have an assignment, Mara said, surprising them both. For you. He felt the old, blessed burn of being told what to do by someone unlicensed to order him. Please, Braben die. Write us a label for the days that don't ask for ceremony, she said. We need a name to put on the calendar that isn't good or bad or normal, something Elias would have drawn with a little road going through it, he thought. The house waited without helping. Anyway, he said finally, he loved that road. We can borrow it from his city. Mara smiled. Anyway, she repeated, as if testing a chew. I'll put it on Tuesday. Put it on next winter, Jonas said, eyes on the middle distance where radiators learn humility. Give it a season. They were still there when the doorbell rang, sharp enough to cause a reflex. Mara flinched. Jonas stood. Adrian found himself halfway to the hall before he remembered that moving toward a sound is not always medicine's job. It was Clara. She stood on the threshold with the polite audacity of people who bring new language to houses and hope they aren't turned away. She carried the grid tube and the level and a bag that looked heavy with paper. She began to apologize and then caught herself. Sorry, no, she corrected. May I? Please, Mara said, and this time the word sounded like a ribbon being cut. Clara came to the table and revealed her bag, laminates of the hallway map with the after door, a page of legends in a child's font with adjectives that had been negotiated with adult hands, a small card that said, Blue dot equals where we agree to be wrong first, with a removable sticker shaped like a small sky. I made a thing I want to be ugly if beauty gets in the way, Clara said quickly, embarrassed by her own care. Families keep asking for something to put on the fridge that isn't pity or a miracle. I want to give them a tool. Mara reached and took one of the laminates. She held it the way one holds a photograph of a face you won't get to correct anymore. You made maps for refrigerators, she said. God, and she laughed, the rare sound of gratitude that allows everyone else in the room to stay human. Jonas turned the level end over end, respectful. Does the bubble work in kitchens? He asked. It prefers them, Clara said. They tested it on the mantel again. The bubble found center without theatrics, a small green proof of something that had nothing to do with deserving. Do you remember, Clara asked Adrian, as if there weren't two other people in the room, the assignment? One object you haven't used because you refuse what it asks you to be? And Dan, I burned an omelet, he said solemnly to the assembled, and Mara barked a laugh that felt like furniture creaking in relief. Jonas saluted the idea with the handle of his knife, and Clara, satisfied with the witness, set the laminate on the table like seed. They talked until talk was nothing but the evening's natural permission. He left them as the light forgot itself and the radiator did not. In the stairwell he wrote "anyway" in his mental calendar across a week in January and felt absurdly like spring had been invited to sit in the back pew. At home, he pinned Clara's laminate to the wall, shy among maps with older ink. He put the blue dot sticker nowhere. He wanted it to be a negotiation each time. He marked another point on the graph just above the hinge, then added a notation in brown domestic mercy. Omelet 1 and a second in blue. Borrowed map for refrigerators. He stepped back. He felt the old temptation to admire symmetry. He refused. He practiced witness instead of proof. The mirror in the hall showed him a man who could pass for healthy to anyone who needed him to. He felt a small pity for that man and forgave him for continuing. A message from Henley. How many hinges today? 6, he replied. Counting my neck. Good, she wrote. Tomorrow, inventory your soft things that act like blades. Don't pretend you don't own any. A photo from Patel. Ferris with a crossword book, pen in hand, scowling at a clue. He hates 5-letter synonyms for endure. Teach him abide, Adrian wrote. It won't win, but it will help. A line from Morgan, no greeting, no signature. The wall better be worth the printer ink. I'm going to waste asking for a copy. It will be cheap, Adrian wrote. It's mostly air. Silence from Morgan that read as approval. Clara. Tessa's husband put the blue dot on the microwave because that's where he always argues with Hope. I told him it counts. It counts, he typed, and realized he was extending permission like pronouns. He did not feel like a god. He felt like furniture chosen well. He took the scalpel from its drawer and placed it on the counter beside the pan again. He wrote 2 more strips of tape. On the steel, witness. On the iron, practice. He understood that labels are fragile, that a bad day could make him rename things back to their old violence. He trusted the wall to correct him. He lay on the couch in the hallway he'd built and watched the ceiling learn dusk. The voice did not arrive as instruction. It arrived as a chorus that had learned to rehearse under its breath so it wouldn't scare the audience. We proceed, it said, plural, polite. Yes, he said, with terms. In the other apartments, hinges worked without being noticed. Doors quieted themselves. Someone leaned a chair back onto 2 legs and didn't fall. In the ductwork, air practiced being a room's patience. He slept with his hands open, palm lines visible, as if a mapmaker had been given permission to draw rivers where they naturally went. Chapter 9. soft things with edges. He woke before the alarm because the room had learned him. The wall held its map the way a chest holds a breath, not to hoard, to keep timing. Above the hinge, the sentences he had taped yesterday still looked newly printed. I am good at this. They are not mine. He said them once, quietly, like rinsing his mouth. Henley's assignment waited in his phone like a polite blade. Inventory your soft things that act like knives. He made coffee without performing competence and stood in the kitchen writing the list with a gravity usually saved for operative notes. Soft blades, compliments. First name, anesthesia. Second name, permission only if earned. Forgiveness, first name, solvent. Second name, hinge. Hope, first name, stimulant. Second name, corridor. Expertise, first name, blanket. Second name, shelter if breathable. Silence, first name, pillow. Second name, container, again. Routine, first name, lullaby. Second name, metronome. Promises, first name, gauze. Second name, stitch, if tied with terms. Kindness, first name, aftercare. Second name, climate. He stared at kindness, aware of how easily he had once sharpened it into an instrument that made people behave. He underlined climate as if weather could be cut into. A message came from Patel, uncharacteristically long. Ferris tried abide and decided it tastes biblical. He's correct. He wants to meet furniture. Noon, okay? Also, Morgan wants your wall photo by 3. Don't make me be courier for your metaphysics. He replied, Noon, okay. Wall by 3. Bring the crossword. I want to lose gracefully. Clara. Tessa wants to see the OR. She says she needs to meet the room that will refuse to be impressed by her fear. Can you walk her through it without making the lights into gods? He thought about that, then typed, Yes. We'll count hinges and leave them unnamed. Mara. The house creaked exactly once at 412A. Emser. Not a river, not a boy. A board settling. Jonas said, We're learning to weigh differently. I kept my eyes closed and let the noise be carpentry. He wrote back, Anyway, I'll stop by later with nothing. Henley, last. Bring the pan if you plan to forgive it again. The room is ready to be patient. He wrapped the pan with the care of routine rather than ritual, slid the legal pad into his bag, and left. Ferris sat in a chair like a man suspicious of furniture on principle. He wore the expression of people who have been asked to watch their bodies do slow work, annoyed at the pace, grateful for the going. The crossword lay on his lap like a field he intended to misname into blooming. You, he said when Adrian entered, pointing with his pen, the one who didn't steal the nurse's counting. Guilty, Adrian said. I brought an apology in the form of losing to you. Ferris smirked and tapped the clue. 5-letter word for endure. Your abide fit. I decided not to hate it. Help me with 7 down. To hold without owning. Keep, Adrian said too quickly, then shook his head. No, house, if you're a poet. But the puzzle probably wants rent. Ferris wrote rent and grimaced. Ugly. Which means right. He looked up, the levity slipping. I heard them say Monroe at a desk yesterday. The hall went quiet like a hand on a mouth. You know when people think they're respecting a room but they're actually putting it on display? It felt like that. Adrian did not flinch. It's an old case that keeps practicing being over, he said. Rooms forget in bursts. We're teaching them to forget in corridors. Ferris nodded. Whatever keeps the nurse counting like she does. He gestured at the letter on his bedside table. I read it. I liked the inventory. No one tells you what they didn't take. They should, Adrian said. It resists myth. Ferris's eyes sharpened. You going to keep doing this? He asked. Writing to strangers who survived without you? Probably, Adrian said, until it becomes a performance. Then I'll stop for a while and ask the wall to scold me. Ferris laughed, then winced again, hand over sternum. That's the hinge, right? He said. Between pain and proof? Between pain and bragging, Adrian said. Proof's not the enemy. Ownership is. Ferris folded the newspaper and pointed at his chest. This belongs to me, he said, and to the nurse when she counts, and to whomever I tell my anger to, but it's not a stage. Help me remember that when you people roll me places. I will, Adrian said. I'll write it in the orders if they let me. Patient's heart is not a stage. He left the room after a while, feeling both useless and corrected, the way a level feels when its bubble finds center again after someone jostles the table. The OR was empty when he walked Tessa through it. The lights, off, resembled punctuation, not suns. The table looked honored rather than hungry. He kept his hands in his pockets to prevent them from describing tools in the old confident ballet. It's smaller than I imagined, Tessa said. I thought it would be a cathedral. It's a very clean garage. Good, he said. Cathedrals hunger for worship. This room wants procedures. She walked slowly around the table, careful not to disturb anything that would resent disturbance. Where do people stand when they are afraid? She asked. Everywhere, he said. But usually here. He showed her the corner where spouses loiter bravely just until the anesthesiologist's voice becomes the room's main grammar. And here, he added, touching the spot beside the tower of monitors where residents learn to be quiet and efficient simultaneously. And here, touching the air above the head of the bed where the nurse who counts keeps time from swallowing itself. Tessa nodded at each. And you? And to at sea raid Wendidia. Ola, and de os and sage, and to at sea dia. I stand where the light asks me to, he said, and where the hinge is. The hinge is the place where the blade hasn't earned the right to be a blade yet. She considered that. Will you be the one cutting me? No, he said. Dr. Patel will. I will be the hinge if the room allows it. I will be furniture if that's kinder. She met his eyes like a person who wants medical truth spoken in unadorned nouns. Are you good at this? I am, he said, feeling the old heat and refusing its intoxication. And you are not mine. A smile flickered. Thank you, she said, for saying both. At the door she paused, looking back at the table. Will the room remember me? And eyes. It will remember your posture, he said, and the count. The rest is for your house. She nodded once. As people do when they borrow courage they intend to return with interest. She left without touching anything. He stayed a minute, touched nothing either, and let the room forget him as practice. At Henley's, the pan sat between them again, dark and patient. He placed the list of soft blades beside it. She read, pencil tapping twice at Hope. This one, she said, likes to pretend it's a surgeon. She looked up. How do you use it without cutting? By naming corridors instead of miracles, he said, by letting anyway be a day on the calendar. Good, she said. And forgiveness? And it done. I'm trying to treat it like a hinge I can install, not like an event I deserve, he said. Mara taught me that by cleaning a shelf. Henley smiled with the tired delight that comes from recognizing your profession in other people's chores. Homework, she said. Before you sleep tonight, find something in your apartment that needs repair and repair it badly. Leave evidence of your lack of virtuosity in plain sight. Bring me a photo." He laughed. "I can oblige." "And," she added, "write a letter to the man who first praised you for speed rather than accuracy. Don't send it. Bring it. We'll adjust the verbs together." He nodded. "I already know which man." "He, perhaps." "Of course you do," she said. "Go mind your hinges." Back home, he took the photograph of the wall he owed Morgan. The image captured the circle, the hinge line, the small house with chimney heart, the laminate with after, the legend with colors that made a child sense while telling an adult truth. He sent it with a caption he couldn't resist. "Low-tech ICU." Morgan wrote back a period. Then, 2 minutes later, "Bring the level tomorrow. I want to see if the bubble is sentimental." He smiled. He set the phone down and opened the drawer. The scalpel looked less like threat today and more like the fossil of a language he could still speak but didn't want to live in. He placed it on the counter beside the pan, both labeled with their new names. He went hunting for something to break. The kitchen drawer of miscellaneous obligations offered a lamp with a crooked neck, and a switch that had decided the word on was a suggestion. He disassembled it slowly, as if practicing what it feels like to be wrong at a gentle pace. The fix was ugly electrical tape that looked like an argument, but the bulb lit, steady as a metronome in a patient room. He set the lamp on the counter and did not clean the adhesive fingerprints, evidence of non-virtuosity, a hinge between pride and utility. Clara banged once on the door, her knock, respectful in its refusal to pretend to be a violin. She let herself in with a grin that had learned to stay when criticism arrived. "I brought the bubble to judge your photograph before you give it intimacy with printers," she said, hoisting the level. She set it against the hinge line. The bubble found center. "Coy. She approves." "She?" he said, amused. "She," Clara repeated. "Gender is a courtesy you extend to tools you trust." She saw the lamp. "Repair badly," she said, pleased. "Henley?" "Henley," he confirmed. Clara touched the electrical tape and left her fingerprint next to his. "I added a hallway to Tessa's map," she said. "She asked me if it would be insulting to write after before we've done the before. I told her maps are invitations, not guarantees." "Good," he said. "That sentence needs to live on a fridge." She eyed the scalpel. "How's the animal with perfect teeth?" "Sleeping," he said, "dreaming of new names." "Don't let it learn pronouns too early," she said. "It'll ask for citizenship." They ate the kind of meal you feed to working rooms: cheese, apples, leftover bread turned into something else by heat. They marked the graph, a point modestly above the hinge, nothing flamboyant. The axis looked like a spine learning its age. Clara left with the level, promising to escort it to Morgan's tomorrow like a diplomatic pouch. He watched the door close without the compulsive counting he used to require from locks. In the quiet, his phone buzzed. "Mara, we put anyway on Tuesday. Jonas says it makes Monday behave. Bring no gifts tomorrow. Bring your failure to fix things perfectly. The house wants evidence. I have a lamp," he wrote. "It works, and it looks like a lesson. Henley. Photo, please." He sent it. "Good," she replied. "Ugly and functional. Perfect. Patel. Tessa scheduled for Friday. She asked to meet the room again after seeing it behave. She also asked if she could bring tape. I said yes, without knowing why. "She's building a hinge," Adrian wrote. "Let her. Morgan, late. The board asked for your comment in writing. Give me 3 sentences that explain your hinge to people who keep knives in PowerPoints. He considered, then typed, a hinge is the inch between tool and harm where naming can still prevent cutting. We install hinges when we let uncertainty carry weight in the room instead of hiding under optimism. A good outcome without a hinge is luck. With one, it is practice. Morgan sent back, "Stop being quotable. You'll embarrass me." He turned off the overheads. The lamp he'd repaired badly lit the kitchen in a way that made Staines honest without indicting them. He liked it. He took the pan off the stove and set it on the counter next to the scalpel and wrote a 3rd strip of tape. Lamp, anyway. At the wall he added to the legend, "Purple things mended ugly on purpose." He drew a square near stay and labeled it repair. He drew another near return and labeled it ruin kept. He understood for the first time how many ruins are worth keeping if you name them clearly and stop asking them to be foundations. Before the couch claimed him, he wrote a letter, not to the boy, not to Ferris, to the man who had first praised speed. "Dear Dr. Chow, you taught me decisiveness like it was a sacrament. You called hesitation a form of harm, and you meant it as compliment. I swallowed the lesson until I digested my doubt out of reach. I have used your praise like oxygen in rooms that didn't need hyperbaric anything. This is not a letter of accusation. It is a renaming. Thank you for saving lives by insisting we not freeze. Please forgive me for converting that into a religion. I am learning hinges. I am trying to make a pause that does not bleed. If you ever taught a man to count while he cut, know that your count remains. I am giving it back to a nurse. She uses it better. I will keep your audacity and send your worship to the fire." We proceed plural with terms A and. He placed the letter under the lamp so it could live in unflattering light. He took one last trip to the bathroom mirror and touched the new, dull tape above his sternum without object. Witness, not proof. The voice entered the room the way steam enters a bathroom, by permission and by physics. It spoke in the grammar of rooms that had learned to share. "We proceed," it said. "Yes," he said. "Ugly if we have to, kindly if we can." Outside, someone practiced a scale on a trumpet 2 floors down, missing the 3rd note and laughing audibly before trying again. A hinge between error and music, he thought, and slept with the feeling of being furniture chosen carefully by the houses he loved. Chapter 10. The Door That Opens Both Ways. Friday arrived with the nervous poise of rooms about to be honest. The wall in his apartment had slept well. The hinge line looked freshly drawn, though he hadn't touched it. The repaired lamp gave the kitchen an unflattering truth he had grown to find merciful. The pan sat on the stove like a lesson remembered. The scalpel, labeled "Witness," reflected a rectangle of window light and nothing more dramatic. He stood beneath the sentences above the hinge and said them once, under his breath, tasting each syllable. "I am good at this. They are not mine." Then he put the level in his bag, because Morgan had asked to meet the bubble in person, and a copy of the refrigerator map, because he had learned that even surgical days belong to kitchens. On his phone, confirmations in small human weather. Patel. Tessa checks in at 7. Wheels at 8:15. She asked again if she could bring tape. I said yes again. Clara. Ore is prepped. Room looks like a garage on purpose. I told the lamps not to act holy. Henley. Afterward, if you have breath, bring me the way the room behaved. Bring failures, too. They teach without charging. Mara. The house said anyway to 3 things before breakfast. It's learning a language I didn't know was ours. He sent back brief replies. Okay, yes, later, because the morning asked for nouns, not adjectives. At St. Ecliptica, the hallway outside pre-op reset his pulse to a rhythm he now recognized as practice, not permission. He found Tessa seated on the gurney, hair braided like a strategy, eyes that had decided not to widen for any man in scrubs. "You brought tape?" he asked. She lifted a roll like a talisman. "Blue painters," she said. "If I'm going to be property for a while, I'd like to label the room." "Permission granted," he said. "The room likes honest graffiti." She looked at him carefully. "Are you good at this?" she asked, wanting to hear the answer land in the air, not on paper. "I am," he said, "and you are not mine." She nodded once, as if the sentence had installed a hinge in her spine. "Walk me to the threshold," she said. "Then be furniture." He smiled. "I can manage both." They entered the OR together. The lights were on, but they had learned not to impersonate sons. The table was ready and uninterested in performance. The nurse who counts had already aligned sponges and clamps with the domestic exactness that makes catastrophe treatable. Clara stood at the monitors, hands behind her back, an apprentice priest who had thrown away the incense. She met Tessa's eyes as if eyes were doors, not mirrors. "Good morning," she said. "We're going to install a corridor through your fear. Patel will use a knife. I'm here to use nouns." Tessa breathed out a small laugh. She tore a short strip of blue tape and pressed it to the rail of the table, writing with a marker that had survived pockets and laundry. After, another strip on the IV pole. Now. She hesitated, then placed one on the edge of the instrument tray. Hinge. The nurse glanced at it, considered, nodded once as if to say, "Yes, that is the right label for the small inch between wanting to save and wanting to own." Patel entered, mask at his neck, composure dressed in economy. He found Tessa's gaze and tried on a sentence he would not have said 6 months ago. "We will proceed," he said, "with terms." Tessa lay back, eyes on the light that had decided not to be a god. The anesthesiologist spoke with the calm that knows chemistry's way through panic. 10, 9, Tessa's hand found the rail. Adrian put his palm under it. Not to hold, not to claim, to become surface. At 6, her grip loosened. At 2, the room's grammar changed. Adrian stepped to the wall and did what he had agreed to do. He became hinge, not cutting, not narrating, holding the inch where naming prevents harm. He watched Patel's hands, beautiful in their precision, reluctant to brag. At the nurse's counting, he felt the old urge to put his own voice on the rhythm. He refused. He adopted the metronome's pace silently and let it correct him from the inside. Clara's eyes flicked once to the blue tape-marked hinge. He saw her mouth form a word behind the mask. "Stay," he did. When the tumor, ugly and insistently itself, finally made its geography visible, there was no flourish, no private choir. Patel did not ask for applause from the instruments. He asked for suction and then silence. There was a moment, a bead of time that would have intoxicated the old man he had been when he saw how an extra millimeter of resection could make a cleaner scan and a worse life. He felt his hand move in the pocket of air, wanting to instruct. He felt it stop. He let the inch hold him. From somewhere that had once been God and was now architecture, he heard his own voice, unadorned. "They are not mine. Leave it," he said. Quiet, to Patel. Patel looked up 1 second, one hinge. He nodded. Leavin', he said, and did. The wound closed with the dignity of tissue that forgives because that is its job. The nurse counted her last count. The lights pretended they had always been practical. In recovery, Tessa's face went through the sequence of expressions rooms know by heart. Absence, irritation, question, relief, grief for nothing dramatic, gratitude's refusal to perform, sleep. He stayed long enough for her to learn the shape of his furniture. Then he left, chest full, not with victory, not with proof, but with the relief of accuracy practiced without theft. In the hall, Morgan waited like a lighthouse, pretending to be a man. He had the level in his hand. The bubble isn't sentimental, he said by way of greeting. It found the middle over your hinge and then got bored. Good, Adrian said. Boredom is honesty's reward. Morgan tilted his head toward recovery. She yours? He asked, already knowing the answer and testing whether the answer could pass a room temperature lie detector. No, Adrian said. She is ours until she is her own again. Today I was hinge. I watched, Morgan said. I've seen you braver. I prefer this. He handed the level back. The board accepted your sentences. They don't understand them and will recite them at parties. This is how change pretends to be consensus. Thank you, Adrian said. He paused. And the boy? Morgan's face altered by a degree. Mara sent a note, he said. Through Henley, through me. It's a ridiculous chain. It said, the vacuum makes lines the carpet believes in now. Adrian swallowed. Good, good, Morgan echoed, and his voice did that lowercase thing he had warned against. He left the hospital without collecting a single leftover glory. In the lobby, a volunteer sat behind a desk with a face that suggested patience had been her sport once, and now was physics. He thought of all the hinges she installed daily without nouns or levels. On the street, the weather had decided to be forgiving. He walked to Henley's, the level under his arm, a man carrying a bubble that had learned restraint. She opened before he knocked. What failed? She asked, because this was a room where failures were dignified early. My addiction, he said, sitting, briefly. It asked to cut through the inch. I told it to be furniture. It sulked and then forgot me. Henley smiled, not kind, not cruel, accurate. And the room? N.M. It stayed a garage, he said. It did not beg to be a cathedral. We did what garages do. We made something work and cleaned up after ourselves. And the patient? Henley asked. She will have a life, he said. Not an immaculate one, a inhabited one. And your hinge? She asked, nodding toward the level. Held, he said. Unpretty, steady. Homework? She asked. Please, he said, and meant it. Tonight, she said, write the last page of the book you pretend you aren't writing. Not to publish, to put the blade down inside it. Title optional, bring it, and we'll agree whether endings should be hinges too. He nodded. I know its name. Of course you do, she said. He stopped at Mara's. With nothing. The house opened its breath and did not offer performance. Jonas was repairing a cabinet door with a screw that didn't match, humming under his breath like a man who has accepted beauty's demotion. Anyway, Jonas said by way of greeting, and Adrian laughed. Mara had written anyway in pencil at the bottom of the calendar, small and stubborn like a note to gravity. She stood in the hallway with a roll of the same blue tape Tessa had used, tearing off small gestures and sticking them in places houses learned by hand. Here, now, later. She placed one at the radiator, heat, one at the door jamb, home. "We don't need the labels," she said, "but they make the nouns behave." "Labels are hinges," he said, "temporary, generous." She looked him over with the scan of a woman who has learned to tell when language is working and when it's performing. "You look less in love with knives," she said. "I'm in love with nurses who count and people who fix cabinets badly," he said. "It's safer." She invited him to stay for an omelet and apologized for its edges. "Perfect," he said, and meant it. After, he left them to their evening, which sounded like water run for no reason other than to hear pipes try their lines. At home, the wall waited. He took a photograph for Morgan and sent it without commentary. He put the level down. He placed the scalpel on the counter. He turned the lamp on. He opened his legal pad and wrote the last page, because he had been writing it for weeks, even when he pretended not to be. "The Anatomy of Regret," he titled it, because accuracy is a kindness. Beneath, in a hand that had learned to be legible even to rooms, this was never a manual for cutting. It was a set of instructions for putting the blade down an inch sooner and calling that inch by its names: hinge, pause, witness, door jamb, sternum, silence that holds rather than hides. I believed for years that regret was a tumor to be excised. I have learned it is more often scar tissue that teaches the body to move with a new honesty. You do not cure it. You map it, so you stop asking it to be a god or a punishment. I have tried to inventory what I have not taken. I have tried to count aloud with nurses instead of inventing rhythms I could brag about later. I have watched heat try to become rivers and become, instead, the thing that keeps houses human. I have burned food and repaired lamps badly and allowed rooms to memorize my hands again. When I am tempted to cut what cannot survive my precision, I will press the flat of the blade to my sternum and say the sentences that make me less dangerous. I am good at this. They are not mine. I will look for a hinge and, finding none, I will install one. Failing that, I will leave and let the room be a room without me. If you are reading this and looking for an exit, I can only offer corridors. They are plain. They are patient. They have labels in a child's hand. Anyway, after now, here they do not end in a miracle. They end in a kitchen or a bed or a hallway that lets you put your palm flat on a house and feel it say, with its old radiators and its new tape, "We proceed." Plural. With terms A, V, he stopped. He put the pen down as if handing a scalpel to a nurse after the last stitch. He did not sign the way authors do when they want covers to matter. He initialed the way surgeons do when they accept that records are for rooms to remember, not for posterity. He set the page under the lamp. He took the strip of tape that read witness off the scalpel and stuck it to the paper's top margin. The blade did not become dangerous without it. It became something else, a tool that would behave itself if he remembered his sentences. He texted Henley a photograph. She sent back no words. A small check mark, the kind that arrives from systems and people who refuse to overpraise. It felt right. Clara knocked once, the sound of a colleague who knows furniture has a bedtime. He opened. She stood with a paper bag and a grin. "I brought celebratory bread that is indistinguishable from ordinary bread," she said. "And I wanted to sit under your wall before we both pretend sleep is optional." They sat on the floor and ate bread like people who had been given permission to be boring. She looked at the last page under the lamp and did not ask to read it. He didn't offer. They let objects keep their secrets. "Tomorrow," she said, "I'm going to bring a resident here and make them explain the hinge to your lamp." "Cruel," he said. "Educational," she corrected. "I won't produce the knife. I'll ask them to fix your cabinet." "It's already fixed badly," he said, pointing to the lamp. "Good," she said. "We will practice not improving it." They laughed softly. The apartment decided to be a room, not a narrator. After she left, he walked to the bathroom mirror. He did not expect a haunting. He expected glass. He found it. A man whose face had learned fatigue without worshiping it, whose eyes did not beg to be told the difference between mercy and competence. He lifted a finger and tapped the spot over his sternum. "Witness," he said. The mirror obeyed without flourish. He turned off the light. The couch in its hallway received him. The wall kept its geography. The pan cooled. The lamp kept telling stains the truth and asking nothing in return. The scalpel lay on the counter. Unoffended by its demotion, the voice came once more, not from the ductwork or the boy or the building or the old intoxication, but from somewhere inside the theater of his mouth where language first learns to be anatomy. "We proceed," it said. He answered into the dark that was not absence, only a container with excellent acoustics. "With terms," he said, "with hinges, with rooms that prefer to be rooms, with kitchens that call bread by its name, with hospitals that learn to count without applause, with houses that read our hands." His chest rose and fell. Practice, not miracle. He slept with his palms up, open to be read by morning, unafraid of interpretation. In other apartments, someone burned an omelet and called it dinner. Somewhere, a nurse counted softly, so panic remembered it had to keep time. Somewhere, a child drew a map of a city that would never exist and labeled its roads anyway and after and now and here, and a mother put it on a refrigerator with a blue dot that moved each day to wherever they agreed to be wrong first. Somewhere, a mentor who refused to be sentimental in lowercase printed a photograph of a wall and put it in a drawer and denied it to visitors. And in an operating room that had learned not to be a cathedral, a light hung over a table, ordinary and honest, shining on a surface where a hinge had become a climate. The room waited for morning without craving worship. The door, newly aware of its vocation, opened both ways.